So what we're going to do is we're going to rank every Premier League club's most used 11. Now, full disclosure, me and Neve tried to do this about a month ago.
Hold on.
But it wasn't really a well-rounded idea at that point.
Okay.
And we thought, do you know what? Let's get all three of you guys, all of us together, and take it up a notch. So the idea here is to try and get a little bit closer to the truth, to explore what we've actually seen. Because I think sometimes when you see different squads, different clubs, you see the badge, you see the sort of the top earner, you see the total market value, or wherever you want to look, But in terms of the players that have been available throughout the season, I think it throws up a lot of questions, which we can explore and discuss. And then through that, we can put together a bit of a list, which I messaged you, and I was so pleased you said this back to me. You're sort of up for changing your mind, because I found this really, really difficult, because there are so many different elements when you're trying to rank how good a team is based on this sort of most used 11. Because I think it's quite revealing in terms of the quality of the management, the effectiveness maybe of the style of play, and a lot of things in between. Neve, how did you find putting together your 1 to 20?
Yeah, I found it difficult to, like you say, differentiate between are these players really good footballers, or are they really good at what they're being asked to do?
Right. Yes,
by
absolutely.
The person they're being managed
do you know what?
by?
I'm going to actually search, because normally I have a word of the week.
Uh-oh.
And the word that popped into my head as I was walking over the bridge to Spotify Studios on a glorious day, thank God, finally getting some sun, was the word maturation.
Okay.
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 So it's the action or process of maturing. Okay.
Yeah.
And because what I think is really difficult here is the fact that some players, so there's down the bottom, for my squads, there's a squad that's probably got more names, but I think they've gone past their best. And therefore, I think and it might be a bit of a rogue shout, I feel like there's another team that might have less names, but those players are kind of on their way up in terms of their potential and how good they can be. So I think that plays a part in this as well. And that in itself is something that is changing all the time. Like in terms of, like, there must be moments where you've seen players that, like, even just a year ago, say like someone like Casemiro, right, over the last, 18 months, when that first season he was with Man United, he was playing really well. Everyone's lauding him. Fast forward like less than 12 months, Carragher's saying leave the game before the game leaves you. So like I think with these squads, sometimes you can get kind of blinded by the badge. So that's why I think this will be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know? I'll be honest. You said something then, and I had I had a strong response to deliver to it.
It's
but
an ugly one, or
it's such an ugly one. I think it's a straight red. But
right, go for it.
do I say it? Do I say it? What should I say it? Should I say it?
I don't know, mate.
Do you know
cut it out.
Well, okay, you decide. You can cut this out if you want. Do you know that idea of like leave the game before the game leaves you? Yeah. Do you know what irony is?
Go on.
I'll leave that there. There.
Okay.
Because sometimes you've got to be careful who says what they say.
I'll be honest, I don't. Yeah, I think it's a cruel comment.
To come from there, that is a statement in itself. But I was around those years,
right?
So I'm just going to leave that there.
Right. Let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on.
Right. So this will be 2 parts, or if you are watching it on YouTube, then you'll get it later, but you will get it in its entirety. We're going to go from 20th to 1st when it comes to where we think these clubs rank. And we're looking at their most used 11. So what we've got is squad lists in players and the positions that they've been playing, which, as I say, is pretty revealing because there are some absentees along the way. Man City in particular, when we get to that, I thought that was incredible.
We'll get there. Might take a while if we're starting from 20, but we'll get there. So
in 20th spot, Neve, who have you gone for?
Southampton.
Okay. Nedum. 20th spot, who have you gone for?
I'm here to support Neve in all her opinions, so I've gone Southampton as well.
Okay, I have gone for Leicester.
Interesting. Why?
The reason I've gone for Leicester is that I just think that the whole squad is one where there are some names in there, and also some names of players that, I knew that guy and they did well in the Championship last season, but coming into the Premier League, I just feel like from an athleticism point of view, I think there's some glaring problems there. I think the game is becoming more and more, it's becoming more and more crucial to have that within your team. I think it's an aging team. I think in terms of the ripening or the maturation of this team, I think they're on the other side of it. And in a lot of the metrics, they are the worst. I think Southampton have given away a lot of points from silly errors. You can attack the style if you want to attack the style. And obviously they have been woeful. I appreciate that. But I just think I think if we pair them together, I don't know if I've have you guys got Leicester in 19th, if not 20th?
I don't know.
No.
You got even higher.
I've got Ipswich in 19th.
Yep,
yeah.
same.
I'm amazed by that. Okay, shall I just leave?
Up the north.
Yeah, is that what this is? Is that what this is? Okay, so the reason I look at the Winks, I look at Christensen, I look at Vardy, who's like giving everything, but is obviously right at the end of it. I look at
But then you say that like
Faze,
he's
they're
giving everything,
terrible.
but he's right at the end of it. I still regard him as like he would still improve Southampton. Do you know what I mean? Even though you're saying that, I still look at him as
Vardy
a
is not
good
the hill I
name.
want to die on here. Like,
Yeah.
for me, it's more like when I look at Vestergaard, when I look at Wout Faze, like they are just no way near good enough for the Premier League. If I'm
whoa, we're moving on from that.
I think they're not though, are they?
But so Faes was he Belgian international? Vestergaard, is he a Danish international?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're
Do
saying
you know
that
what I think it is?
I'm
I
not
don't
saying-
necessarily think that
Now,
they're poor, but
you're-
I think they're quite slow. And
Yeah,
I
I
think
get
maybe
this.
doesn't suit the speed of the Premier
I
League.
get that. I get that.
International football is different to the Premier League.
100%. But
Two,
yeah.
I don't think so. Let's compare it with Southampton a little bit here then, because I think that might be interesting. Because that was something I wrote down when it came to Southampton. Players here that you think, quick yeses or nos, you think should get a move to another Premier League club. This is a game I like to play.
Well. Before we go any further, like there's an idea of moving to another Premier League club, but there's also the idea of going to like a progressive Premier League club. Because
Right.
in theory, these players coming down, they could be going up with a team that's being promoted as well, which kind of puts them in the same situation.
I appreciate that. Okay, so to above that bottom newly promoted team
which
level.
for the record, there, like I want to make sure that people understand that these are all good players.
Yes,
you know
of
what
course,
I mean?
of course.
From my perspective, I'm not putting them down, but I know how tough this league is.
Yeah, and we did a whole podcast talking about relegation and how hard it is for those teams. And when you look at all the metrics, there's a very clear gap between, and not just the points. You know, you want to go a level deeper, look at the goal difference, but then over that, you know, shots per match, like the creativity of it, XG, like those three that came up are a long way off it.
Yeah,
I just felt like. So let's go through these players, because I feel like there's some players in this Southampton team that could get a good Premier League move.
I think you're going to name maximum 3.
I'm happy for some to be wrong, but it's about your opinion. That's
Of
what the
course,
game's
it's
about. Opinions. Come
It's
on.
about opinions. Yeah.
Flynn Downs. I'm not starting with my strongest. I'm just saying he's the first name I've got. Do you think he's capable of getting a Premier League move and playing Premier League football?
Yes.
Do you know what I will
You're
say
so
about him, though?
uncomfortable.
I will say I've been ever so slightly underwhelmed by him this season because I thought he was going to be like their best player based on what I'd seen last season in the
fair.
Championship. But maybe he'll just suit a team where, like, the football he was able to play with Southampton in the Championship, if he could get close to playing that style at a Premier League club, maybe who allows that, I think maybe we'd see that he's a lot better than what we've seen.
I would chuck in there that I think I could see Downs at Everton being a useful cog. Just chucking it out there. Okay?
Instead of whom for Everton?
That's got nothing to do with it.
Of course.
Is he good enough? That's the point. Is he good enough?
Let's just gather
Crystal
players.
Palace. I can see him at Crystal
just
Palace. I could do all right
Yeah,
there.
he's got for sure.
So look, Downs. Here's the list of names I've got here that could get a Premier League move, or it's up for debate. I'm intrigued. That's why I put them down here. So Fernandes, Archer, Harwood-Bellis, Dibbling, Ramsdale, Walker-Peters. I would say all of them. Archer definitely up for grabs there. Maybe needs to go down and do a Solanke and go score goals and come up. Maybe that's the deal with him. Fernandes has been really good for them in a team that's obviously been pretty woeful. I appreciate that. But Harwood-Bellis, I think, is a Premier League player. Dibbling, I think everyone can appreciate his talent. Ramsdale is like, what's he supposed to do? Walker-Peters, I've always had a high opinion of Walker-Peters. So that's when I'm looking at those two squads, I feel like when I look at Leicester's, like I'm struggling there, if I'm honest. That's my take on it.
Neve, do you want to go?
Yeah.
Do you want me to go?
Do you want to put me in the bin first?
I think actually defensively, I can see what you're saying.
I just think they've been crushed by the style of play and the start, and then it's just an ugly place to be. But like the age profile of that squad as well is in a better place.
But then
than
if you
Leicester.
look at that Leicester team,
Yeah.
I think you could do the same thing.
Let's play. Okay. So Hermanson.
100%.
Yeah.
I actually think he's destined to go like big.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know I actually had him as someone that Chelsea should have looked at as a potential goalkeeper in the summer. Like I really do think he's like on his way up to the top.
You know, like Arsenal had like 4 left backs the other day. Like, you can imagine like Chelsea just chuck them all in last game, get all the goalkeepers in, you get 7 goalkeepers, just get a record. Hermanson, James Justin.
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe, yeah. Wout Faes. I'm saying it with my tone, aren't I?
Yeah.
Really going after Faes. Vestergaard. Do you know what it is? I know what this is. This is from the podcast the other week, where you were like, whenever a goal goes in when you're a team down the bottom, the centre backs look terrible because they're there in shot.
Well,
Maybe
a theory and workshopping it, yeah. So this might sound a bit crazy to some people, but some players that have long curly hair, they always get spoken about as if they're maniacs.
I have the same theory.
Because you could see David Luiz, you could see Fires, you could see Cucurella. Like, people see them and they think they're like over the top eccentric, and everything that they do gets spoken about in a really weird way.
Yeah. So I think it works both ways. Like, if you're playing well, you'll be seen.
Yeah.
I think
Genie as well. Yeah, this is added up.
Yeah.
It's a thing. It's a thing.
For sure. I feel like Joe Linton and Bruno Guimaraes, I think they're sometimes doing it as well. Just go with the bleach. You're going to get spotted.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing.
There's something in there.
Definitely a thing.
So I'm going with Leicester. You're both going with Southampton. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm going with Southampton because as I look at that starting team, I can't see a world where they would have had maybe 40 goals in the season. I can't see a world where some of those players, because you mentioned the ones who could potentially move on somewhere else, but there are other players who will definitely be with Southampton next year in the Championship and might be there for the foreseeable future.
I think the reason I went with Southampton was because I think that their promotion to the Premier League was quite premature. And I don't think they did ridiculous amounts.
Do you mean premature or do you mean fortunate?
No, I could say premature.
Not premature. I think they still probably had a few things they needed to do to that team before they were ready to be promoted to the Premier League. Obviously, they came in via the playoffs against Leeds, who everyone thought it would be Leeds that would win that.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they're here. And like you look at Ipswich, who also probably were a bit premature with their promotion, but they went out and spent quite a lot of money because they knew they needed to. Whereas I feel like Southampton didn't really do the same thing across the whole team.
It's a very fair point. Yeah, it's true. Let's go. So I've got Southampton in 19th spot. Who have you got in 19th spot, guys?
Ipswich.
Both going Ipswich.
Yes, I believe that's right.
This is a curious case, Ipswich. I thought this was revealing because for me, I've just had it in my head. I've been disappointed with Ipswich. I think with the money that they've spent, I expected more.
What is more? You're talking about just more points to be in a different situation?
I think more points. I think maybe still going down. Like it could have been tight. Like who knows? But like for the gap to be at the level it is.
At what point did we decide that Ipswich? By the way, at what point? How long have they lasted in that fight with Wolves? Do you think? At what point did we decide? Like just as a question, objectively, that actually Ipswich are going down? Was it about 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, well, they've not won a game in 2025. They're only team in the top 4 divisions.
So that's where they've they've kept going until this point. I personally think that when you consider that just a couple of years ago they were in the 3rd division, I think I don't care what I really don't care what they spent because I don't think people realise how much they have to. It's almost even though they spent loads, it's still not enough because they had to drastically improve that team because of where they were.
You're right. The lack of experience was absolutely there for all to see. Like I think it was like Ben Johnson had the most apps in the Premier League, and then after that it was literally like nobody. So I appreciate that, but I think when we're talking about like the quality of the players there, actually when I really really looked at it, again kind of playing that game of like how many of these players are sort of good enough for the Premier League. When I was looking at their 11 here, so you've got Muric, Twanzebe, O'Shea, Greaves, Davis, Morsey, Kayust, I think you say it, Burns, Hutchinson, Schmodix, Delap. I then looked at it again and I was like, okay, that is poor.
I was tempted to put them 20th. I was more tempted to put them there than Leicester there.
I think the back line in particular for me, I don't think I've concentrated on that area of the pitch enough because I've looked at Amari Hutchinson, I've looked at Delap, and I think there's talent there. Like, even now with like new signings like Enciso, like there is some quality knocking about. Jack Clark is a good player. Philogene I think is a good player, but I think I'm wrong. That was where I was going to go. Is I think I'm wrong overall because I think that back line has just and you can see it by the goals that they've conceded, has been worse than I expected them to be. I thought McKenna might get a little bit more out of them.
I think he's done a really good job. I really do. I think they're starting to make mistakes in games now where you're starting to see the players are all but giving up a little bit. Like there's a few moments where they just switch off a little bit. The recent game I watched them, there was a moment, where you
gave
just
it 3 away.
Where you just sort of think, where they'll just in a split second moment you've just done it, and it's they've just made that mistake, and I think so they're going to potentially. It's potentially going to get to a point where they concede goals, and it gets worse. And that will overtake our mindset of what it was in the beginning for Ipswich. Because for the first few months of the season, they went at teams and they were good. They played some good stuff. They pressed up.
No, go on.
They pressed up quite high. They were confident. There were a lot of good moments.
Yeah.
And there was a lot in that where you sort of look at it and think, if McKenna was to stick with them, he goes down with them. He could bring them back, and with a bit more, they can get behind the teams.
It's giving 2023-24 Luton.
Yeah, I literally was about to say the exact same thing. It's Lutonitis a little bit, like where it's. And I think a year ago we spoke about it. You were like, it's all very sweet, isn't it? And we all fall into it because, like, I'm desperate for Ipswich to prove that, like, it can be done, right? But that's what I mean. Maybe I'm playing devil's advocate, literally in my own mind, where I'm going, well, they've gone Ipswich, and then you see, like Phillips. I think Phillips is a really good player. Leif Davis, I think, people saying, could he have had an England call up? 2 calls apparently gave him a call. Delap's like really good. Like, apparently there's these decent players here. So I expected a bit more.
Not Phillips, but a lot of the talent that you've listed. I think what's really glaring to me is the lack of Premier League experience there. So even the players that you're suggesting are the talented players, I think Philogene kind of sums it up for me. This is a player with a lot of talent.
Yeah.
However, we saw that talent in abundance at Hull. But when he went back to Villa, there were moments where he looked slightly out of his depth.
Yeah.
So the jury's still out on all of this talent. I think that's the issue.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And in fairness, like a youngster coming through, getting a chance in the Premier League is great, but it's greater when you're in the right environment. And sometimes the right environment is to have people around you who know what to do in any particular situation. But when they're all young, like to skip a step as well. So I had Leicester third bottom.
That's cool.
And my ranking of going Leicester, Ipswich, Southampton is how if the next season was to roll on with these same squads, I would predict them to finish not necessarily first, second, third, but that would be the other 3 clubs as I see it.
That's interesting. Yeah, so to the same point, I think as much as it's Lutonitis, it could be. I was looking at it the other day, and I think there's a new league here. There's this sort of like lead. There's the teams that have gone down: Leeds, Sheffield United, Burnley, and then the yo-yo guys. Like more so than ever before because they keep going up and down, and so going up and going down is just. I think at the moment, with the way it's looking, it's going to become par for the course. So what you really want to become is Bournemouth. And you want to be able to bounce back up and then your net quality, your net potential, your net appearances, the age of the group still like maturing in the right way so that when you do go up, you're like Bournemouth or you're like Fulham and you go, no, we are good enough to go here. So I think that's why I put them third bottom. Because I actually think if they go down, I could see that Ipswich team, Smodich scored 30-odd goals in the league last year. Like, it'd be interesting to see who leaves from them and do they need to get a little bit of money through the door or not, just to be smart with the parachute payments. But I could see them going and then coming back and being like ready in 2 years' time. And that's why I put them in third spot.
Did you have the same as me, Neve?
Yeah, Leicester in third bottom.
Locked in. We're so locked in.
You are so.
It might go west now, though.
Yeah, okay, let's see.
It might go west. The awkward fourth bottom position.
Okay, next up in 17th spot. Shall I go? Do you want me to go? I'm going to drop another bomb.
Yeah, go on.
I've got Everton.
Okay.
So I've got Wolves.
Okay.
I've got Brentford.
Oh! Nedum. Well, that is the hottest of the takes.
It is, but it's more so because as I was doing this list, like the bottom three kind of spoke for themselves. But then I found there was, like, not to get ahead of it too far here, but I'm sort of like grouping Brentford with Wolves and with Everton.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've got they're in that chunk of 3.
Yeah.
Are they in your chunk of 3?
So that's really interesting. I've got 4 chunks here. Yeah. And I've got a 16 to 20 chunk. And Brentford aren't in that.
Wow.
No, they're in the third quartile.
That'll be an interesting one to discuss.
Yeah.
Then.
I think so. Brentford's interesting. I guess let's talk about it now because obviously I wouldn't actually come back to it a little bit later, but not in the same depth. There is a thing with Brentford where this sounds weird, but like, can you really be can they all be huge names and play for Brentford? Like I think there's a problem that, like, if you ask a casual Premier League fan, name me some Brentford players, I think they'll say Mbeumo, they'll say Visser, and I think they'll kind of stop there.
Damsgaard, I think, because he has highlight
Damsgaard this year,
moments,
yeah, for sure. But I think it's one where I don't think they get the respect they deserve.
I would agree.
Right.
I would agree, but I'm still going to put them in that position now.
Does that highlight what you're highlighting slightly the fact that how well run and coached they are? Is it great?
Yeah, I think so, because this is, from my vision, this is the ranking based on the most used 11, not necessarily like where they are, relatively speaking, or where they deserve to be based on how they've played. But if at the start of the season, like as I did this whole thing, I thought if this was the starting 11 at the start of the season, and this is what you're going to play for the whole season,
That's nice.
would the manager say this is the first 11 that he would want? Would the manager see this and say this team is going to be progressive and cause me to play here, there, or wherever? And I think, again, because this is all opinion based, the blind spot that I have is one whereby at times I don't know what a fan perceives about certain players, but we see them do well. For example, so this guy's good, so they must be first choice, but sometimes they're like second choice.
Yeah.
Sometimes the manager doesn't really want to play them. But again, I look at that Brentford squad and I look at the people like Visser, like Mbeumo that have been overperforming, relatively speaking, for the price that say they pay for them. And I think they're a very good side, but I still have them below other starting 11s in this league, but nowhere near the bottom 3 as such.
Yeah, there is. There's a massive jump there, isn't there? So what I will do is I'll just quickly run through the teams each time, just if you're just listening to this. But of course you can watch it on Spotify. So we've got 4-2-3-1 when it comes to Brentford. Flecken, Ruerslev, Collins, Pinnock, Lewis Potter on the left, Norgard, Janelt, Mbeumo on the right, Damsgaard and Sharda, and then Visser up top. The one thing to say about this season, the loss of Ivan Toney has definitely kind of raised the market value, which is obviously useful for Brentford because you're always going to have to sell at some point. Well, no, maybe not. But Mbeumo's gone from 9 goals and 6 assists to 15 goals and 5 assists. He was injured for a little bit last season. Visser's gone from 12 goals and 3 assists to 14 and 2. And Damsgaard has gone from no goals, 2 assists to 2 goals and 10 assists this season. The thing I'm always wondering with a team like Brentford is if those guys come out of that team and go into a different environment, like, can you get the same level?
It's a good point. I do. I look at sometimes the way that they set out in that team, especially with that 4, and then they sort of tend to have like the 2 midfielders in front of the back 4 as well. And if you take those individuals out, they do so well in what Frank wants them to do. If you take those individuals out, there's I'd say a few of those names as well, sort of towards the back, sort of starting to see it's get a little bit maybe less intense with, because I think in terms of the squad, Brentford, that's where I think Brentford are quite low down compared to the rest.
Yeah.
Maybe that 11 there is actually a good 11, but I think
it's solid. It's been there for a while. Like names like, but also there's a few elements of development there. Like Lewis Potter's getting better year on year, and Damsgaard, you're seeing sort of the 3rd year of his development, I guess. I think Damsgaard in particular, you can see from the assist there how they're playing so differently now because you haven't got Ivan Toney. And actually Damsgaard, the amount of times he's the pass before the pass that leads to goals as well, it's allowed him to thrive. They're just a really well put together unit. And I was looking at the sort of stats for all the teams. What was really interesting, their conversion rate is the best in the league. Like, so when they kind of create, and also sort of shots on target, things like that, they're just a really, really smart.
I think it would be
football club
clever
and how
for
they play.
them if they can make some signings that enable them to have. They can be savvy with their budget if they make signings that will eventually maybe take Pinnock and Norgard's role. But for now, would just be there to help alleviate the minutes so that they can continue playing at the level they play at, but not have to play every single minute, every single game, because that's how they can keep the intensity up to keep the standards.
Do you think they'll ever have a go at it? You know, you talk about signing players.
What does that mean?
So, like Brighton, they've, my answer in my head as I was thought of the question was like, Brighton can go for it because they've brought in 300 million from selling Basuma and Caicedo and all those things. Is that the only moment when Brentford will go for it?
But again, go for it in terms of just spending money or trying to be successful.
I guess getting a higher caliber of maybe like, so what they do a lot of the time is they'll find Damsgaard, like they'll go for him because he's got real talent here, but he's got awkward knees, but we think we can manage that and we're going to get a great player out of it. Or there's a couple of players who are on the periphery of the Liverpool squad. So Carvalho has actually not played at all really this season because for whatever reason. But what's his name? I can't remember. Van der Berg, is it? Yeah, like those kind of players. That feels like a new sort of step in the market for Brentford, where we're going. Well, Liverpool wanted those players, and they are probably good players. They're just not going to get anywhere near the team because you've got Konate and Van Dijk and Carvalho. You've got Harvey Elliott and Szoboszlai and Jota and all these players. So they find value in different ways. But is there a moment where you go, nah, this guy is mustard. Let's just go get him.
I don't think so. Just because I think players like that can change the culture. And if you change the culture, sometimes that's a change for the worse, not for the better. So you might have somebody who in theory is of a really good quality in terms of potentially being able to play as high as you want. But if it upsets everything, then there's no point in doing it, especially for the amount of money that will be there and you'll be tied into it. And not least of all, so maybe some of this is linked to the Liverpool contract situation. Like, things are set in a certain manner, and the moment somebody raises the ceiling, other people demand to follow. So do you want to change your club again from that standpoint? Because if you do spend £50 million, for example, on a player to go to Brentford, how much would be paying the player? And now, all of a sudden, that salary for the year, which is, I think it's probably bottom 5, whatever, in the league, here's this person that's up now. Well, if I'm in Burmo, well, I want more. If someone else, well, I want more.
Yeah.
And then, do you give it to them or do you not?
I'm fascinated by what direction they would go in if Thomas Frank was to leave, what manager direction Brentford would go in. Yeah. How would they try and get someone who is a known name, or what route would they go down for that?
Yeah, I mean, see, someone in my head, I went like Lee Carsley, and Lee Carsley'd been at Brentford before, but he actually kind of, I think maybe around that time with Thomas Frank, he got a couple of games as a caretaker.
Yes.
But he's a funny one, Carsley, where he's kind of like, I'm not ready for this, and he seems to let everyone know that. But maybe this time round, they might come back in, and at least he kind of understands the Brentford way. I'm fascinated to see. I think, I got to spend a bit of time with Thomas Frank, and I was like, my head was spinning by the end of it about how articulate he was, but how he was just so impressive. But it'd be interesting to see how if you pick, that's what I mean, if you pick that guy out and put him in, someone like Dean Smith, who went to Villa and did, he didn't do terribly, right? But everything else needs to kind of be in place for it to work out for you. So it's going to be interesting to see when he makes the move. So you've got Brentford in fourth from bottom. What's that, 16th? I've always known as. Is that right?
No,
it's not 17th. I'm really struggling with the numbers here as I'm writing. I've gone for, I went for Everton. I think this is kind of tip of the cap to David Moyes and overall a very functional team. I just looked at the 11.
What comment? Functional.
But they are though, aren't they? But so Pickford, Ashley Young, Tarkowski, Branthwaite, Mikolenko, Mangala. Really that's a neutral. That's not positive or negative.
That's what I mean.
You can have that. Mangala, Idrissa Gueye, Lindstrom, Doucouré, Ndiaye, and Calvert-Lewin. I just look at the left side of that team, and I think that's not, especially without Ndiaye in that team at times, and in the last few games. I look at the right back position. Now O'Brien's come in, and it's been much better. They've got that bounce from David Moyes. The midfield too. It just throughout. It looks okay at best for me. And I don't mean that as a dig. I just think I'd be excited if I was an Everton fan. You can make that move. Obviously, that money come with that. They've not spent for like quite a few transfer windows because they spent too much. You think they do it in a better way this time round. And I think the future's kind of bright for them. But I actually think they've done really well with that team and that squad, personally.
Do you think that Dyche was doing a good job?
I think he was keeping it afloat. But, from the Everton fans I was talking to, it was turgid. And I think that it was like the open play goals were like minuscule, like outrageous. I think I'm guessing here, this is a made up stat, so don't check me on this, but it's something along the lines of like, in a year, it was like 20 goals from open play, and like the next worst was like,
I think the thing
I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was bad.
The thing that sort of, if I was an Everton fan, that would have been my sort of big disappointment with Dyche was when he came out and alluded to the idea of the fact that this was their last season at Goodison. It doesn't mean anything, and that it's, to him, it's just another season to get through. And I think that gave big red flags to me. If I was a supporter, I want the manager in the last season at Goodison to understand that we want to go out with something to be proud of. And I think that's the big thing that David Moyes has done, is he's restored a heck of a lot of pride back into the club, and he's built a bit of a connection between those players and the supporters at the perfect time as they say goodbye to that stadium. I think that's really important, and I don't think Dyche understood that.
I think David Moyes creates such a great temperature with Everton. I remember like years ago, they had Stephen Pienaar and players like that, and it was a good solid team. And I remember they'd come to Loftus Road and you go, fucking hell, like they were popping it about, they had real energy, they were physical, they was just like, yeah, and with Sean Dyche, it was just like the temperature was just so like cold. Like it was just Baltic football. And I think David Moyes has just got them like, just having that bit more energy, aggression. And they're so much better. I think he's done an outstanding job. And that's why they've got...
outstanding feels a bit heavy to me.
I think they've not lost in 9, have they?
Yeah, but I was talking in relation to the squad that they have, because that squad could be further up the table, I think. So, for example... to talk about the differences between Dyche and Moyes, should we play a game?
Let's play a game.
Okay. So, if I told you David Moyes has been a manager in the Premier League for 707 games, yeah, how many goals would his team have scored in that time?
Bearing in mind, Sunderland.
Yeah, well, but think about the fact that, do you want your manager for your team to be scoring like 40 goals a season? So it's 707 games. How many goals have his team scored in that time? David Moyes.
I would hope he's on about
707 games. Think about it.
I would hope he's on 700.
Are you sure about that? So that's less than a goal a game for 700
I'm sort of focusing on this Sunderland period, but I guess he had Man United as well, but
and
it didn't go outrageously good. But he created Prime Everton.
Lest we forget Prime Everton.
Let's remember that he created.
What would you reckon, Lou?
So 707, how many seasons is that? Like,
I bet 650.
So how many seasons would you
Maybe
say
it's a reverse narrative of what you think.
I don't know what you're doing.
So like 18 seasons?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Wow. What a long career. He must be quite good.
Yeah.
So...
Are you thinking of the best case or the worst case of David Moyes here?
Whilst you're playing at home, make sure you give us a 5-star rating.
So am I saying that whether or not, how many goals would I want my...
I'm gonna start with Moyes, then I'm going to go
What
to
do you think
Dyche.
David Moyes has got?
What do I think David Moyes
How many goals is there? In 700 games. How many
goals? You're not going to get it right, Nate. Just chucking them around there. You want a viral clip. I know what you're doing.
Come on.
She's done it again.
So I reckon...
This is from the Premier League website, by the way. So if it's wrong,
official.
If it's wrong,
they won't get it wrong. The Premier League is a great brand.
Yeah, I reckon 850.
959.
All right.
Yeah?
Oh,
okay.
you done me there.
959. So then if we were to go on to Sean Dyche, now that you know those numbers,
right.
Sean Dyche, 333 matches as a Premier League manager.
Much smaller data set, Nedum. I would say that I reckon he... 400?
323.
All right, so you're backing my point then.
The point I'm making is that Sean Dyche didn't capitalise on the team that he has, whereas David Moyes does.
Okay.
So as a consequence, the squad is
no.
Whereas I think for me, the squad that they have and the starting 11 that they've had in that time is better being the fourth best within that league. But I think Sean Dyche limited
But I think,
him.
with Dyche, I feel like maybe it stems from the fact that like his success with Burnley for such a long time, a lot of that was built on the amount of 1-0 victories they would get in games.
Yeah.
When they would get their wins. And I almost think maybe it's a case of like, that's what he knows. Do you know what I mean? Like, if that's what you trust,
clearly.
then that's the football you trust.
I think maybe,
Everton had the least amount of possession in the Premier League under Dyche. So that's defending and just trying to get one goal in a game, one shot in a game, or maybe one set piece to get a goal in a game is how he wanted to approach it and felt he could trust. But I do think you're right. I do think that we're seeing under Moyes that when they go at teams, that there's more quality in there that perhaps Dyche was telling us.
Yeah, you're right.
But I still think defensively there's a lot of quality there. I still think going forward, I think potentially could be improvement.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think with Dyche as well, with Burnley, they were excited to be there, and that sounds patronising, but I'm not trying to make it that. But in that period, so staying in the game, sneaking a 1-0, everyone's okay with that. And I'm not saying Everton. I think Everton fans want a touch more than that, and I think David Moyes provides that. Whereas, like, then he'll get to a ceiling, maybe. Like with West Ham, there was this feeling that, oh, hang on a minute, I think we're better than that now because we've got the stadium, we've got these players, we've got this money, and that's where things like go out of sync maybe sometimes.
100%. I think with Everton, as I see it, they needed to be somewhere between Roberto Martinez and Sean Dyche, because in Martinez, in the style of play that he had, not everybody was getting into that because it doesn't necessarily suit the identity of the fan base as such. And the middle ground is David Moyes, which is why they've been successful in the times that he's been there before.
Neve, who you got in 17th?
Wolves,
yes. Okay, let's talk Wolves.
Yeah. Maybe I've been harsh there. I've got
Wolves in 16th, so I'm going to jot them in.
And I think maybe I'm also happy to admit that there is biases in football. And I think my bias has been throughout the season is that at the beginning of the season, I was asked if one of these bottom three, the three that came up, if one of them was to stay up, who would it be that goes down instead? And I always had it in my head that it would be Wolves, because they'd lost the players they'd lost in the summer, and they just kept going down that asset-driven recruitment way to replace them, which is what Gary O'Neill had actually alluded to in an interview
sold
as
big
well.
names in the summer, didn't they? Kilman,
sold big names, got big money for it as well, and replaced it with future assets. And I just questioned whether that quality was enough.
Yeah.
But then obviously there's players in that Wolves team, like you look at Aït-Nouri, you look at
Well, yeah, let me go through it. So here we go. So you got Sarr, Doherty. This is a 3-4-2-1, guys. Sarr, Doherty, Bueno, T. Gomez, Semedo, Andre, João Gomez, Aït-Nouri, Bellegarde, Cunha, and Larson up top. So yeah, that's the most used 11 there.
I think that there's been too many games this season for a team that has really struggled in the league. And if it wasn't for Ipswich's massive drop-off, would still be in a situation, because it's not because Wolves have suddenly got really, really good that we're in a situation where Wolves are fine. It's just that Ipswich have just progressively seemed to get worse.
Yeah.
This is a team that have really struggled, but the points that they've managed to pick up this season, a lot of the time, I feel like they are just down to Cunha a lot of the time really taking over in a game. And some of the goals he scored, they really are just him creating the chance for himself. And I just think, well, if that's the case, then surely I have to put them 17th.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. So the Premier League table here, they are in a little island on their own, aren't they? Because you've got Ipswich in 18th with 17 points, then Wolves with 26, then West Ham and Everton and Tottenham with 34 points. And when you look at the stats, they've really exceeded their XG in terms of they've scored more than they've created. But they've actually conceded a lot more than they've given up as well. Yeah, so kind of both boxes, they've been good and bad, like more so than XG. And so I think that comes back to your point with Cunha, that I think he's been absolutely integral in terms of like scoring some of these incredible goals just to keep them going and keep them afloat. But I don't know, I was looking at that squad there, and actually, again, I'm still kind of playing this game of would they, would people want them? And players like Aït-Nouri, João Gomez, Bellegarde, I've been really impressed with recently. Cunha, I think there's quite a few there. Larson, I think, is getting better and better. What do you think about Wolves?
No, I think that's fair, but they're only a couple. We did the big three, didn't we? The next three down, which is for me, it's Brentford, Everton, and Wolves.
Yeah.
That was my order.
Okay.
And Wolves are a good side. I think the Cunha thing's interesting because he's obviously scored some great goals, but because the team's struggling and he appears to be doing well, he almost plays like he's empowered now.
Yes.
And I don't love stuff like that.
I get that
I'm a bit
impression from
jaded
you.
by
You
that.
feel that.
I remember
That's
it said
it,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a bit jaded by that for several reasons. But
It's
yeah.
more because we see because we will continue until the very end of the season because he's got that quality and because he can score from 30 yards and what have you. You know, we will continue to see him bail them out in so many words, but it still doesn't change the fact that if I'm on a team with him, some of his body language it would irritate me. And I said it before. I stand by it.
Yeah, I'm backing you 100% there. Yeah.
I saw this video where he went to this hospital and he was just really lovely. So I'm stuck in that space.
Yeah,
but I get it. Like when you and he's I was joking about it. Was it it was an Ipswich game, so he stole someone's glasses, something like that.
Yeah.
So he's got the tempers.
Got sent off recently as well,
there.
didn't he?
Yeah. He's missing, isn't he, at the moment, right?
And if one of his teammates doesn't do the right thing, he is your player who might do the thing where he puts his hands in the air and really makes a huge deal out of it.
Yeah.
And maybe this just comes from the fact that type of player that does that, it just I
Never experienced that.
struggle.
well, I mean, just once or twice. But I think in regards to him, like it's almost like it's two different conversations because we can talk about the quality that he has, but as Neve's saying, like some of the body language and tone in terms of the way he does things on the field, like it's Marmite because for some people they say, oh, well, he cares, he's passionate.
Yeah.
But for those that have to live with it, it's like it's quite arrogant.
I'm intrigued to see how he would do where he's not, like you say, he's not the
not top
main
boy,
man.
yeah.
I was about to say, actually, do you think he will continue to be like that? If, let's say, he did sign for Arsenal, do you think that because Arsenal sometimes make the wrong decision in front of goal, do you think that if, like, Martinelli shoots when he should pass it to him and he misses, do you think he'd do the same thing in an Arsenal team?
No, which says a lot about how it's probably, well, obviously we could be wrong, but I think it says a lot about his current status within the club that he's at this moment in time. Because if you are that person, you'll be that person everywhere. Like, for example, Ibrahimovic, everywhere he goes, it's the same person.
Yeah.
It's the same person. Whether people like it or not, it's the same person. Whereas I think this Cunha side of things, why did we not notice this last year? Or potentially,
it's really weird though, because I remember when he sort of started to come into that Wolves team, and it was West Brom they played in the cup, so I remember it well, obviously because of the rivalry, and his sort of attitude on the pitch and that desire that he showed there was really impressive. So I think there's always been a little bit of something in him, but maybe he's just starting to channel it in ways that is
status
not great at the moment. Maybe his next step is to just make sure that he's channeling it in the right ways consistently.
Yeah, I personally, I don't know him, you know what I mean? But watching from a distance is the type of thing which doesn't look good. But the fact is, his teammates still respect him, the manager's still picking him. So clearly it can't be affecting him too much. But I think if you were to be a club that would be looking at him, it'd be hard to completely ignore how he perceives to be when he's unhappy with things.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's it might be a sort of an age thing as well. If you think he was at Atletico Madrid, he got the big move and all that, and when you probably didn't have the same status there. And I guess you will be able to answer this. When you're in that kind of dressing room, when maybe you are a bit younger and you're not the sort of top dog, your inhibitions are
possibly.
Good,
but then when you are more experienced and when the way that I see it anyway, if you're playing the best for a team that's struggling, it would be better for you to try and raise up other people as opposed to sort of solely focusing on yourself. Because essentially at some point, those 25 yarders aren't going to go in.
Yeah.
So then what happens is you're stuck in the same place. So people are going to be running that little bit extra for you. Or it's more a case of, he scored, we've won, everything's great, cheers. Or is it there's more to come?
A player that does that, who he's clearly got a lot of energy and passion just in his body, and his way of releasing it, he does it in all the right ways, was Osimhen in the season that Napoli won. I think a lot of players could look at the way that he basically, if he had to deal with, let's say, for example, you got Politano in the team, and all the players around him might do something wrong, he would go over and be the first one to go and give him a little hit over the head, but in an affectionate way, and get him up, and then him and Kvaratskhelia, we used to hug each other on the pitch and what have you. And I just think, I love it when players do that. I just think it's so much better.
Have we stuck Napoli in here, by the way? What's going on?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Premier League starts playing Napoli's involved.
That's
All right.
good. We've got you every month, so I'm intrigued about Osimhen because, like, in terms of sort of the personality of him, because I don't know as much about him as you obviously will do. But that's another podcast.
Yes.
So let's keep moving. So you've got Wolves in 15th. Who, Neve, have you got in 16th and 15th?
Yeah, so I had Everton 16, 15 Brentford, but I think after listening to sort of Nedum, I think I'd probably swap those around and put Brentford in 15.
Go me. Key lobbyist for...
Brentford in 16, Everton in 15.
Yeah.
There.
Okay.
Big Everton lobbying in here in the studio.
How have we got to a point where I'm
Big toffee,
I'm
look at
sticking
me.
up for Brentford? This is disgusting.
Oh, gosh. I can't even look at you
I
anymore.
know, who am I? 15th spot, I've got West Ham.
Oh, interesting.
You got West Ham 15.
For this season, this most used 11. Because there's been a lot of stuff going on. We heard from Antonio in the week this week. Delighted Antonio's okay. God, I love Antonio. Anyway, their team, 4-2-3-1, Areola, Wan-Bissaka, Mavropanos, Kilman, Emerson, Alvarez, Souček, Bowen, Paquetá, Kudus, and Antonio is in that most used 11. The forwards, you've had a few up there. Antonio, Bowen, Kudus, Paquetá's played up there a couple of times. Fulkrug, only 3 games. Danny Ings as well. A lot was expected from West Ham this year. And I put them quite low because I just look at that team, that most used 11, and it doesn't... I think the front 4 are good, but I think Paquetá's had a bad season for them. Antonio's obviously kind of been in and out and hasn't scored many goals, and things have happened. So he's actually not been there as much as you'd kind of want. Bowen has had a couple of injuries here and there. The team as a whole has just been pretty poor. The midfield's been disappointing. Mavropanos, I'm not sure about. It was all those things together for me. Emerson, I'm not totally sure about. When you look, and I think that the picture with all of this is that, like you were saying, like that these are outrageously good footballers, but in a Premier League where there's so much money swishing about and so many clever squads being built, I actually think this West Ham squad's and that most 11's has actually not been that impressive when I'm looking at it.
So that's the thing, though. Have they been disappointing, or is this what you would have expected from them?
That's
if you look
exactly
at that,
my thoughts.
If you looked at the team,
Well,
It's like Kudus and Paquetá. How do you, are you looking at those two and you're like sort of you're looking at their form and that's influencing where you put them in this sort of ranking, or are you just remembering that these two are still like really good footballers that have just been below form?
And look, that front foot, I love Bowen. I think he's massively, massively underrated, and that's why I kind of got them up. But everyone's got some. Yeah, I get what you mean. I just think Paquetá is just a bit of a shadow of himself this season, and so this is the point, and this is why there's no right answers here. Is that we're just talking kind of about today. So are we talking about the past, or are we touching on the future? It's a bit of both for me.
At the start of the season, if you knew that was going to be their team for the entire season, would you expect them to be like 14th in the Premier League table?
No,
I'd expect them to be a little bit higher than that.
So that says a lot about that starting 11 then, doesn't it? Because
But-
you're considering that to be better than quite a few more.
But that, for me, I'm thinking like but does that make it the truth? Do you know what I mean? For me, like in terms of the truth is kind of I'm sort of living in the now a little bit in terms of what can you get from that group. It's such an amalgamation of so many different things. And that's why I've got them in 15.
Yeah, I have them a bit higher, but I have them higher. I'm not going to mention it now, but it's because if they would have had a full crew, if they would have been able to have a Somerville have a bigger impact as well, then all of a sudden that team feels a bit different.
But we didn't.
But I also do think...
Yeah, that's why they're not 14th though.
But I think a lot of their issues actually came under the manager to begin with before Graham Potter. But then I also think a lot of their issues as well seem to be... Look, they looked a bit fitness related instead of quality related. Yeah. There was so many games where I just thought,
sluggish,
like,
right?
Yeah, you guys have just not got the energy.
Yeah. I think I wrote that down actually. Mobility issues in midfield persist. And just a lot of the midfield. There's been a lot of centre midfielders this year, like Rodriguez, Alvarez, Souček, Paquetá, Soler, Irving's played. James Ward-Prowse came back. A lot of different Souček, a lot of different players there. Yeah, I think that there's a lack of athleticism aside from Bowen and Kudus up top for me. So I think he's got a bit of a job there, Potter.
He's happy to have it though.
Yeah. Do you where would you expect them to be next year? Like ballpark? Because where are they at the moment? They're 16th in the league.
For me, the tricky thing about, say, when I was doing this list is that, like, I found out that mid-table is actually quite extensive.
yeah.
There's a lot of really like interchangeable
10
teams.
that
Yeah.
I want to
Well,
put
yeah.
mid-table.
So 4th to 11th is 8 points,
Mm.
and teams in the 30s, 16 or 34 to 39 is 16th to 12th as well.
Yeah.
So it is really, really tight.
So I was going to say I expect them to be like mid-table, but I don't even know what that means anymore. Like, it could be 14th, it could be like 9th or whatever.
14th spot. Neve, who you got?
I've got Fulham.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Please carry on.
And I
Yeah.
think it stems into this idea of the job that Mikel Silva's done has been
Really?
so good. And I think that they're good players. I think Mikel Silva's found a way to accommodate their real threats that has really helped them. So, for example, look at like Sanderberg and Lukic in midfield, enabling Robinson to get really high, and so much comes from him getting high. So it's more that I think the job they're doing is unbelievable. They're a good side, don't get me wrong. But I think Mikel Silva's just done such a good job at playing to their strengths. But as an 11, a whole 11 of players, maybe there's teams that...
I think there's some amazing points there. Yeah, absolutely. Like I think so this is the team. Leno, 4-2-3-1. Leno, Tete, although Castagne's played 10 games, Tete's played 14. Anderson, Bassi, Robinson, Lukic, Sanderberg, or Berger, I never know which one it is. Traore, Smith Rowe, Iwobi, and Jimenez. So what I wrote down was that I've got them higher, quite a bit higher actually. I think they're very malleable. I think that comes back to the coach, which I think is a really good point. I think that we did a video for them for the Premier League this week talking about Fulham and how they play, and actually they're really fun to watch. It's good, honest, positive pass and move football, and individually they've got players doing what they're good at. And their assets that actually not everyone has, like Bassi being able to drive. We were talking about before we started. Bassi able to drive into that area allows Anthony Robinson to be higher up. All these little like techie lads. Like I've got, we looked at the squad list here, and you've got Wilson, Iwobi, Pereira, Traore, all playing in so many different positions. I really, really like them. Really, really like them.
I really like them too. I think they some of the passing play they have is unbelievable. Like I think Silva sets them up to do even more than what they're actually doing. Like I think if they had a few more players, maybe in the forward positions where the quality was just even a little bit higher, I think Fulham would be in an even better position in the table.
To your point on Silva as well, no one scored more goals from substitutions than Fulham this year.
Wow.
Yeah, it's them and another one. Can you guess the other one that are up there?
Substitutions.
Teams that have scored from substitutes.
Bournemouth.
Correct. Very good.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I think there's something for both of those in terms of having a lot of similar
type
profiles.
players,
Yeah. So I'm going to show my hand a little bit.
Uh-oh.
I've got Fulham in 11th.
It's funny you say that because I think I have the same thing.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah.
Finally. I'm
Yeah.
alone out here.
Yes.
Okay, I like that. So who have you got in 14th then?
Forest.
Ooh.
Wow.
Again, I've tried to explain how I ended up being in this position. And at the start of the season, Forest are coming off staying up. But last year, I was a believer that they would stay up towards the end because they had a very good defensive record statistically. Mm-hmm. Compared to some of the other teams that were behind them. But the issue realistically was the amount of goals that they could score. Fast forward to this season, I look at the team and like Murillo. Is it Murillo or Murillo?
Murillo, would chuck out there.
Milenkovic and others. Like Ulayan is one of my favourite players in the league, by the way.
He did it. Have you seen his interview?
No.
He did an interview with Coach Cams and Harry Pinero on Inside Scoop. And I only seen a clip of it. I need to, because we're working on this Arsenal evolution video, and they're asking what it's like to play against these different teams, and he's saying, I think it might be Liverpool. It's like a bit of a basketball match, and then he was talking about Arsenal, and he was saying, Arsenal, you feel like they're not really doing anything, but it's just long. That's so funny.
Yeah, that's so honest. To be fair, a lot of this comes because of my bias for supporting him when he plays for Nigeria. Same with Bassi as well.
Right,
Iwobi, these are my favourite players in the league, obviously.
But Iwobi, by the way,
yes,
what a player! Like he's so technically good.
Yeah, with the Forest setup, if I saw them, in fact, another criteria that I sort of had when I was going through these teams is if I was to put someone ahead of another team by one position, if I was to do a combined 11, I feel like I need to have more players from the team above than the one below. So that's how they ended up being in that position, just ahead of Wolves, because I could see it with the likes of Gibbs White, with Hudson-Odoi, Langas and so on. And then the year that Chris Woods had, for example, it's very unrealistic to continue to be in that manner. But the fact is, he's still having it, so credit to him.
Yeah.
But I think I look at that squad, and for them to have been comfortable in the Premier League this year would have been a more realistic achievement than, say, where they're at right now. So that's how I see their most selected 11, which is, interestingly, it's the 11 that we see literally more often than not.
I think what felt revealing looking at all these teams. So to go through their team, Sells, Aina, Milinkovic, Murillo, Williams, Yates, Anderson, Alanga, Gibbs White, Hudson-Odoi, Wood. That has been a pretty set 11.
Yes.
I don't think they've, at the time of recording, I don't think they've got a single injury right now, or certainly not to have a key first team player. So that is really, really helpful when you're, when you're trying to do well and trying to have that kind of chemistry both with the ball and without the ball, because they play really quick and they're very dynamic. What I wrote down is they're good, but are they good? Which is one of my sort of
they're tough to play against.
But then, do you think that you're only saying that because of the way they play? Do you think that perhaps we rate players more if they play on the ball more?
So
do you think maybe you're underrating Forest because
possibly
you don't see them on the ball as much?
No, I'm okay with the way you can win a game however way you want to, and I think another note I put speed kills. It's about the way they play is dynamic, and that's great. The reason I write they're good, but are they good, is I'm trying to ask myself the question: can they do this again next year? And I'm right now I'm maybe struggling with that a little bit for a couple of reasons. Maybe the way that
why? What are the reasons why they couldn't?
I think the reason why I'm concerned about them doing that is having injuries, being in the Champions League or Europe.
That's the same for everyone, though, the injuries thing.
But I don't think I think with so many more games, I think they would struggle to get to have the same ability to have that week to focus on it each week. Chris Wood, I think. I'm not trying to disrespect him at all, but he has had an outrageous season this year. To do it again with European football, I just think it's a lot. I think that's a fair point.
Yeah, but then I think that's then more about depth and not this 11. Do you know what I mean? The
yeah.
criteria of the 11, if we were saying the whole squad, of course, but every single team that unexpectedly gets into Europe will have to then obviously bolster their squad.
I've got them much higher than 14th, because I think you're right. I said at the start of the season, I was for a lot of these players, less so Anderson, but he's just the first name I've seen here, but Anderson, Williams, Alanga, less so Gibbs White, but Hudson-Odoi had a good end to the back of last season. It was come on now. In terms of, if you're going to go have some of those great seasons and be, reach the potential that people thought that you had when you were at Man United and Chelsea and Liverpool, it's got to be now. And they've done that. They've absolutely done that. What I'm intrigued about, and which I think is an interesting conversation, is this a flash in the pan, or is this who they are now? I don't totally know. But what I do know is most years, Newcastle, when they have that great year and then they're in Europe the next year, it's an emotional toil as much as anything else.
Yeah, to put it into perspective, last year their expected goals against Forest, they were ranked 4th in the league, so that was them being in a dogfight. So for this year to come in and then they're ranked in a very similar place again for that statistic, the difference is they've added the goals now.
Yeah.
So it's more a case of, do you believe that they will be able to score these goals next year? Or are you thinking that they're going to drop off defensively? But the fact is, like you said, this is the year. Given where Forest were at the end of last season, I think if they would have finished, say, top of the bottom half, I still think that's an amazing season.
I agree. The context I was talking about was improve here, be a Fulham, be a 12. Yeah, exactly. For them to be out here is mad to me. Yeah. What I'm intrigued about, I feel like opponents will play against them differently next season as well.
How?
I think it's just a sort of a level of respect, a fear of them in transition, and a different kind of plan for them.
How do you do that? For me, one of the big issues about teams who can play a low block and be defensively aggressive and so on, is that if they have a threat on the counter, then they're always going to be sucking you in. Like, you can't play a low block differently, because essentially you need the bodies to be able to break them down.
Then why don't more teams play like that and win like that?
Because they don't necessarily have an Alanga, they don't have a Gibbs-White, they don't have a Hudson-Odoi who are going to be able to stretch the game full speed immediately. Because a lot of the time, if you have players who are that fit, that fast and that attacking, they're not defensively offering enough to be able to justify a low block.
So what do you think that team, if you have that team again next year, do you think they can finish in the exact same spots?
I don't think so.
I think they've overperformed.
Yeah. But I'm talking about overperforming by 10 positions though. That's the thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think they could be contesting in the top half next season if they continue to develop. But I don't think them being third next year is a realistic expectation.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I totally agree. Let's keep moving. Who do I go? 14th. I put Palace. The reason I put Palace there, and I think Glasner's done a better job than I kind of initially. Sometimes you kind of you go, oh, that's my opinion on that team when we're in like November. And it has to change as the season changes depending on form and things like that. And I think Glasner's he's got there in the end. But when we look at the most used team, the reason I had them a bit lower, and it's kind of like, I guess, feather in the cap for Palace for being where they are really solid this year and having some good moments along the way, is the midfield. So this is the most used 11. 3-4-2-1, that's the way Glasner plays. Henderson, Richards, Lacroix, Gay, Munoz, Hughes, Lerma is the midfield two. Mitchell on the left. Sarr, Eze, and Mateta. I'm not having to go Hughes and Lerma, like two really, really good pros. But I think ideally you'd have Wharton and Decore. And I think that would have put them much higher up. But because this is the most used 11, and I'm not sure the depth is totally there. And some of the signings haven't worked, like they haven't caught fire yet, let's say. That's why I had them a little bit lower.
Yeah, I had them 13th.
You had them 13th, yeah. Lacroix, by the way, I think is really, really, really good.
That back three was what sort of even got them to where they got on mine as well.
Yeah.
I feel like they've generated them quite a lot of their points this season.
Mm.
And you got my boy Eze, or your boy Eze as well.
Our boy.
Star
boy.
With like Eze, for example, because there's maybe been a bit of frustration with him throughout the season in terms of, obviously now Elise is not there and there's the responsibilities now falling a lot more onto him. Obviously they brought Nketiah in. It has made Sarr, so all of a sudden like Eze is like the player. And when you're looking at him and you're ranking this team based on him, are you going purely on his form this season, or are you going on what you know he's capable of?
I think a bit of both. I think some people you go, are they trending? I think they're trending in a wrong direction or in the right direction. I think Eze might have moments of form or moments of where I think my critique of Eze would always be I think his finishing could be a little bit better. I'm not sure. Sometimes I don't feel like he's a killer, like in terms of like taking the chances that he creates. Outside of that, I think he's absolutely sensational. And obviously I am biased, but I think his feet, his ability to wriggle out of play, his dialogue with other players around him, I think is so good. And so that kind of usurps trending form for me when it comes to Eze. I'm just a bit in love with Eze, sadly. Oh, not sadly, it's a great love. It's a one-sided one, but it's a love all the time. So I've got them in 14th spot. You've got them in 13th spot. Neve. We're in 13th spot then. Nedum, who have you got in 13th?
Bournemouth.
Oh, okay. Interessant.
Yes. So we've seen them be really good this year to where they're contesting for not just Europe, but like Champions League football. We've seen a style of play which really suits the players. The manager's really keen on it. And interestingly, I was at their game against Everton in the FA Cup. And in that time, bizarrely, I had to sit like behind the bench. But basically next to all the Bournemouth players.
Does that not happen normally? Where do you normally sit?
No, I don't normally go to games, but I'm usually like in some observer seat. But I'm literally sitting behind Brooks, yeah. and Kluivert's there to the side of me, and I'm watching the game, but I'm listening to what they're saying and watching how they're reacting to things. And Bournemouth were like cooking Everton this first half. I was like, this is crazy.
It's a poor team. No.
Well, first half I said, I didn't say whole game. And as I was listening to them, I then decided to say something to Brooks. I said, tell me a bit about Iraola. Tell me about the style of play. And he was saying things about the style of play which I'd never noticed before. Because I think, and again, maybe it's just me, there's this idea that it's a Spanish manager, so they just want to play good football. You know, they want to build out, they want to do this, keep possession. But if you look, like, Bournemouth's stats for possession are on the lower end in the Premier League, which a lot of people don't really feel because they see the attacking play and so on. And when he was breaking down the style that they have and the things that they need to do in terms of just being able to just get the ball upfield and then try and make people play there, I looked at the most selected 11 that they had, and it's a good team. I would argue that, you know, I think you'll probably make this point as well, a lot of it's interchangeable at times.
Yeah.
But they are super direct. I think from an XG standpoint, they have the second most in the league this season.
Yep. I think, and or maybe third, but they're like just behind Man City. Yeah.
That's like, what's going on there? I didn't expect that from a Bournemouth side, but in reality, like
sixth lowest average possession per game.
Exactly. So they play in a certain style that, again, maybe it's just me, but I thought, Iraola, because everyone's like, oh, he should go to this place, go to that place. But some of those places he goes to, couldn't play this style of football, especially with the personnel that he has.
But it's weird. So do you think that it's Iraola's staff that he's brought that has led to Bournemouth being so ridiculously fit? Like, they are so fit.
Yeah. Let me read through the team because just to paint a picture for people. So 4-2-3-1, Kepa, Arrizabalaga, Smith, Zabarnyi, Huijsen, got Spain call up, Kirkez, who, by the way, Kirkez is the only person to play left back for Bournemouth in the league this year. Cook, who's been right back, he's been centre midfield. Christie, but I've got him in centre midfield here. Semenyo, Kluivert, Tavernier, and Evan Nilsson as the striker. I think the recruitment, I really like the recruitment over the last 10 years from Bournemouth, because I think what they did for a while is they went, like I said earlier, they bought a lot of players and some of them weren't totally maybe ready for it. But I think the year they had in the Championship, it might have been 2 years in the Championship actually, because I think Brentford might have knocked them out in the playoffs the first year. They sort of blossomed. I think it was Scott Parker got them up, didn't he? But there were a lot of players that were ready to come back up and I know this sounds ridiculous, but like, I think they were sort of 23, 24 and they were like, they felt more established. You could kind of see it in their eyes. They weren't as timid, but at the same time, really athletic. A lot of them had a lot of, solid pedigree about them. And they had it, they had a bit more of a go and got themselves that first year. Then you get your second year and then you feel like you belong, or I'm guessing you feel like you belong a little bit. And so the recruitment overall has been really good. And then in the last sort of 5 years, I think they've been really clever in going out and getting those gems, but from a forward perspective, Semenyo, Kluivert, Tavernier, Ouattara as well, could all play along that front line. And what that allows for you is to score goals as substitutes by changing it up and having that renewed energy. But also, like, they've had a lot of injuries, Bournemouth, this year.
Yeah. And
we get the running stats from the Premier League, and when you saw the sprints, it's them and Tottenham by a mile. And who are the teams that had injuries this year? It was those two. So you've got to have... So to that same point, with Tottenham, when you lose certain players, have you got someone to kind of come in and resolve it? And maybe it's a bit of fortune there at not being centre-backs because Zabarnyi and Huijsen have been able to be fit for the bulk of the season. But in the forward areas where they sometimes had different problems along the way, they've been able to fix it.
So where did you rank them?
I've got them... they're in the... I don't want to give too much away, but they're in the top 10.
Okay, so if you think that the players are interchangeable, then why are they so high?
Because that 11, I think, is going to mature
I think there's quite a lot of players in that Bournemouth 11 that I think could quite comfortably slot into like top teams.
Yes,
I mean, Bournemouth have actually, to be fair to Bournemouth, they've been one of those top teams this season. I genuinely think, Bournemouth would be in a much higher position in the league if their in-game management of like moments was a bit better. That Brentford game was such a good example of it, where in that first half I'm thinking, do you know what, Bournemouth have got this covered, like we've got this wrapped up, but it's just those moments.
Yeah.
And it
Well,
escapes
Their expected
them.
points is third in the league.
It's funny
And they're 10th.
because this is a style thing that I saw in the Everton game. So the first half they were destroying Everton. The second half, the way that they were playing no longer allowed them to gain an advantage in the game, but it never changed.
Right.
Whether that was from the sideline or from the players on the pitch. Because at times, like I believe, to be a good side, you can have all the attacking threat, but you need to take the sting out of a game. They don't have a style that has that.
It's not nuanced, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. At this moment in time,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
the manager's not asking them to do that. Because at some point, maybe you do need to put your foot on it and gain possession. Because when the other team's in the ascendancy, like, how do you take it away from them?
But then you look at games like when they played Chelsea. This always sticks with me, this Chelsea game, because Bournemouth knew exactly what they wanted to do before that Chelsea game, and they just
is
kept
the
doing.
draw?
Yeah, and they just kept doing it, the same thing, and we all knew that was what they were going to do. But that's how they got their 2 goals, and it kept working them doing it on that left hand side. Everything went down that left hand side. Through Semenyo making that run between Chelsea's right back and centre back, and then Kirkus making that overlapping run, and both goals came through Semenyo. Got the penalty as well. My point being, like, it's almost like where they are in the table and the season that they've had, that style has got them that. So, do you know what I mean? So it's like,
it gives and takes. I think, Joe, when you were talking about that, maybe it's sometimes like there's the creation there. I think sometimes it's really hard when you're going full throttle to then have composure. That was something I kind of put at Liverpool last year, where it's like that, they play with such intensity, or someone like Darwin Núñez. Like sometimes you want that, like you need that chilled composure to just put it away. And I think there were certain games last year that that kind of hurt Liverpool, but it had got them into that position in the first place as well. And I think the same maybe goes with Bournemouth. I had them higher because I think Kluivert's a really good player. I think Christie, maybe not in name, but I think that's such a clever move, putting him in midfield. Obviously, he's been there a while now. Kirkes has just got better and better and is such a weapon for them. Huijsen, we've spoken about before, I think is going right to the top. Zabarnyi, maybe not as certain, but again, you forget that those 2 centre-backs are so young. And Kirkes as well, really, really young as well. So that's why I had him a little bit higher. I guess, it's a similar question, isn't it? Semenyo, Tavernier as well. Tavernier always kind of produces. Like in, say, like last year, or the year before that as well. He's actually like, when you need a goal, he is there for you. So I don't know. And they're just so athletic. I think that's really important this year. Like I can imagine them making other teams quit. Do you know what I mean? Like Newcastle, I thought Newcastle in the League Cup final, it felt like that a little bit at times where you can imagine, I've played incredibly low level cup finals, but there's moments where you see a little glint in the opposition's eye. We might have you here because we're not going to break. And I think Bournemouth, with that energy that they have, it often works.
And I think it lends itself to playing against top quality opponents as well. And that's why we've seen Iraola's record against the top managers. It's just unbelievable this season.
As bad as it may sound, it's not a million miles away from, say, the way Forest do things. Because possession-wise, them and Forest are probably closer than, say, Bournemouth and, say, a team that's in the top 6 or 7 for possession as well.
Yeah.
Like, it's the physical side of things with the sprints. Basically, it puts you in a position where, as a player, towards the end of the game, the runs back become harder. But for when the opposition are now, like, making these subs, and the person that's come on is going to run just as quickly as the person did for the previous 60.
Right back talking it.
And they're just as desperate to get into the box. It's not even necessarily for like you and your individual thing doing it. It's everyone else sprinting back with you.
Yeah.
And it becomes quite tough because when that style kicks in, it's not for everyone.
The big difference, I'd say, that I noticed between Forest and Bournemouth, and it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on which is tougher to sustain with the running off the ball, is Forest are quite happy to be very deep and let the team come onto them. Whereas Bournemouth, I think the fact they've got Zabarnyi and Howson at the back, who are really good at defending with space behind them, especially Howson.
Yeah.
He is just, I think that's such an underrated aspect of his game.
Because Kirkes is gone.
Yeah, he's
part of their
gone.
tactics on the ball is that he
ability
goes and play that long ball.
Run back when the game's... is it difficult throughout a season, more difficult off the ball to sustain being deep and having loads more in front of you that you've got to run to make your counter, or not having the ball but pushing high so that the big bulk you're running might be running back on yourself.
To be fair, I walk back what I said just because I remember something that Brooks said as well on that day. He said something that Bournemouth work on a lot is how to win the ball back from the opposition and how to then transition from there.
Yeah.
So at times it isn't a case of dropping back to say maybe as deep as Forest do, but they are prepared to like be in a position to be ready to go and do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's the difference.
It's like, because that's something this is why Bournemouth always, if I was to compare them to a team that is like a top team in Europe, it's Atalanta. They really remind me of Atalanta because I think they go into games and they just don't want to let teams breathe.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously Forest, they want to let you breathe loads. Like they're almost inviting you to breathe more.
Well,
but like in their own way, because that's how they can defend the game. But whereas with Bournemouth, they can suffocate you, win the ball back in your half, and then with one pass, they're in.
Yeah.
And then they've got an
But
opportunity.
that's it. Yeah, it's space versus possession a lot of the time. So, like Evan Nilsson's got a couple of goals this year because what he often does is he's trying to read the pass back to the goalkeeper. And so, but if the ball does get played in, there's this sort of suffocating from the forward as well as everyone really as a sort of a five a lot of the time. You see it with like every time I watch Liverpool, and you don't see this with all teams. Like Luis Diaz will come back and make a tackle, where like other forwards will go, well, the ball's on it, it's in front of me now. The difference is, I guess, Forest are just very set and comfortable. And I saw them against Arsenal. And I mean, Arsenal was sort of struggling a little bit from that point of view. But they were camped there and they looked really, really comfortable. I guess from an energy point of view, in terms of breaking, it's who do you want to kind of do the running. It's also far more enjoyable running that way than it is going that way. And then add to that, for Forest, you want Elanga and less so Hudson-Odoi because he's maybe a bit more cute, but Gibbs-White has got that running ability. You want those players to have space to go into, because the more space, the harder it is for a team. So that's always the trade-off between space and possession, I think.
But I think Bournemouth's counterpoint to that could be potentially that if they can keep the ball, even if they don't have the ball, but if they can keep where the ball is in the opposition half, then there's way more likelihood that they'll get a quick set piece, or they'll get a quick goal, or they'll a moment like an error that will happen. They're in optimum position to convert that into a goal.
To travel.
Because there's quite a few moments, I think, in the season where that's happened with Bournemouth. Evan Nilsson's a great example to use as a player that's so switched on to like moments and spotting things. Remember very early on in the season when there was a set piece that Bournemouth had, and him and I can't remember who the player that passed it to him was, but they were both in tune and alert where everyone else was switched off. It was a quick pass through, and then suddenly Bournemouth scored, and it was just like, it just came at you like that. And I think that's what Bournemouth are really good at. They just pull, like they just sweep under the
recruitment's going to be tested again, I think. You got Huijsen who could go. There's been links for all these players, 50, 60 mil. I think it's 60 million release clause. Semenyo, 40 to 50. Kirkes, 40 to 50. Zabani, 40 to 50. So that'll be interesting to see how much that changes and what that means for them. Because I think there is going to, for those mid-table clubs, there's always going to be that churn of like, these players are going to have to, because actually that's quite attractive as well. Like certain players think they want to get over there. I think there's a greater understanding more so than ever before that you've got to be able to play and get yourself almost in the shop window a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And I think for some of the players that you've mentioned there, I think the shop window for their style of play is one that isn't just in England either. You know what I mean? I think sometimes we can have players where we see them, you can see them in the UK. But as I say, when you're talking about like Kirkes, he could be playing left back anywhere in Europe for the way that he does it.
It doesn't shock me that Bournemouth have got some of their players from Serie A. I think they'll continue to do that because although Serie A as a league, when you watch the games, you might think, it's quite a slow league. It's more driven by system and tactics. I can't even, like the amount of players, and this is going back for 30 years now to this day, the amount of players that will say that their most difficult time was in Serie A, training in Serie A, the level of athleticism and fitness that you need in training. So it doesn't shock me that that's where Bournemouth have got Howson from. I'm pretty sure Kirkes was in Serie A. Wasn't he at AC Milan at one point?
AC Milan. He was at AC Milan at one point.
My point is all three of those, but the point I'm trying to make is it's not about them playing loads of games in Serie A. It's more just that experience of the training regimes and maybe like you. Like it wouldn't, because like Howson, for example, didn't play for Juve. Like they just let him go. So obviously, what Bournemouth have seen in him is they've seen the mould of an athlete that, and then they can develop that into a top quality centre back. Because obviously Juventus mustn't have seen that because they let him go for 15 million.
Yeah.
So my point with that is it just doesn't surprise me that So I think a big thing with Bournemouth is not necessarily the players, because I think that they might feel that they can achieve replacements. It's keeping hold of the manager.
Yes. 12th spot. I've got. God, here we go. I've got Man United.
Oh God, you had to, didn't you?
Yep.
Had to.
I've got Man United. Who have you got in 12th, Neve?
I've got West Ham.
You've gone for West Ham. And you got Nedum.
I've got Palace, but we've spoken about them, so I'll let you two
Should
cook.
we do Man United then?
I'll let you two cook.
Yeah, we've spoken quite a bit about West Ham too, haven't we? So maybe let's.
Yeah, James,
let's
all eyes
go
on
to
you, my
United.
friend.
Okay, fine. I thought it's my
All
call.
eyes on you. James
Right,
Allcott,
so,
12th. That's 12th in
with-
the ranking. Man United, everyone.
I just think with all the players, or the good players that kind of have either not hit or aren't doing well, I think the constant difficulties with the profile of the player and the system that they want to play. Absentees: Yoro, Rashford, Xerxes, Mainu, only just in this. Dorgu, so I guess in the future, but and Mason Mount. The team is Onana, De Ligt, and this is 3-4-2-1. We've kind of gone with Amarim's team here. Onana, De Ligt, Maguire, Martinez, Mazraoui, Ugarte, Fernandez, Dalot, Diallo, Garnacho, Højlund. There is potential in this team. I appreciate that. The overall level of a lot of these players has not really been certainly good enough for where they want to be. And I think I had them in this third quartile with Fulham, and I kept swapping Fulham and Man United. So I'll give away my 11th. Yeah, I said that before, didn't I? Fulham. I just think the Fulham team is more cohesive, and I think maybe not their overall potential in terms of what they will be by the end of their career is not higher when you look at Smith Rowe or Wobie or any of those players. But in terms of how accomplished they are as a group, Anderson as well, Jimenez or Højlund is a funny one. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a weird comparison you'd never talk about, but like, who would you rather have right now? It's actually closer than you would probably imagine. And so part of this is down to the form of this season.
Yeah, it's part down to the form. I think if you were to do this, you looked at all of those Manchester United players and you were to do it when they weren't at Manchester United, all of a sudden but you put them as a set together, you'd have them higher than 12 in this, I think.
Yeah, I probably would. But that's kind of where my point of view on this is that I'm trying to take away the badge and the name here. Like, what is the truth of this team right now? And there, look, I've defended Fernandez a lot this year. We had a good chat with JJ Baller talking about him versus the system as a whole. But the three questions I had was like, how good is this team in a year? And who is still here in a year? And when I ask that question, I go, honestly, like, can they actually even get rid of these guys? And then how good is that? How good is this team right now? And with that, I'm struggling to get them above anyone else on this list. That's where I'm at.
But I just think it's really hard to differentiate, like, whether or not that's because of the quality or whether or not that is because that they just are struggling to play in the positions and in the areas that they are currently playing. Because they've got a manager who's been brought in with a very specific style that is not why they were brought in.
I totally appreciate that, but because of that, that's why I have to have them lower. Like, how good do you think this team will be in a year? Because we all, everyone's got to like Amarim. How good do you think this team will be in a year? Like, where will they be knocking about?
So on my list, I've got them considerably higher. But I've got them considerably higher because, again, one of my criteria was I thought when I looked at all these teams, if they all performed to their absolute best, where would I expect them to finish? Yeah. And for me personally, you can write this down. I had United in 7th.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, to think about them performing to their best and put them in 12th doesn't feel right. Like, obviously they're underperforming now and they're in and around that sort of space anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I think them at their best, there will be 6 teams in my mind that will be better than them according to that starting 11.
Should I just, because you said 7, you said 12, so I said 9, so somewhere sort of in the middle.
So you're probably right.
Yeah.
I think the thing I'm trying to get away, and this is why we had the initial idea to do it the first time, was like, if you can just strip away the noise and the badge and all these things, if you play this team against this team, like who's gonna, with the performances that we're seeing,
but I think
who's gonna win it? And I think I'd rather if we're playing right, if we're playing in a knockout and you're trying to get someone to the end of it. Do you want Bournemouth? If you've got Bournemouth against Man United, or if you get Fulham against Man United, if you've got to get these teams against Man United, Forest against Man United, who are you backing to win?
I think you're going off like vibes though.
But I think that
Going off the league table.
I think that's also. I think that is the big factor of that is that those teams are set for their team and they're playing really well in what their team wants them to do, and we can't really make a decision on United just yet because we just don't know. We don't like that's the thing. We don't know. Like
this season, we do. He's been manager for a long time.
Xerxes, for example, is a really good example because as an individual footballer, I really like Xerxes. I think he's a fantastic footballer, but it's like there's been many occasions where he's looked really uncomfortable on the pitch. So is that a reflection of him, or is that a reflection of he's not being used properly?
I think 2 things can be true, and I think that in terms of what we're talking about, I'm not talking about next year. I'm not talking about after a pre-season. I'm talking about now, ranking these teams with that 11 that I can see, and how good they are, and how they play, and putting that within all of this. And I don't think that team beats a lot of these guys. In a year's time, that's why I wrote down this question. How good is this team in a year? I'm totally open to the idea that Amorim gets them working, and I think there have been like shoots of hope for sure. But this season, in terms of what we've seen, like I was looking at the substitutes and like who's had substitutes that have scored goals. Amorim hasn't, and unless it happened in the Leicester game, Amorim hasn't made a substitution that's led to a goal by that substitute since he's been there. And they've not won many games, and where are they in the league? They're joint 16th, whatever it might be. So I think if we can wash away the Man United there, this is quite a poor team right now. I think they just need, I said this as well, like they just need to get to the summer, regroup, get the chemistry, the cohesion, all those things. But I think we all knew coming in, there's a lot of profiles that are a bit awkward here, and you've had 10 years of struggle anyway. But I just think that's why I've got them where I've gone. I'm not afraid.
James Allcott, everyone.
Yeah, that's fine.
Did you do a predictions at the start of the season?
Yeah, I expect them to be much higher.
See, this is what I'm trying to say. Like, I think that
we're playing a different game,
I think we're allowing. I think we're allowing what we're seeing. I think you know what I mean. The season.
We have to, don't we?
But then, if it's as simple as that, then would the ranking not just be the Premier League table? Do you know what I mean? If we're simply just doing based on form on every team, let's just do the Premier League table, and that's how you rank 20 to first. No,
because I think we're appreciating that there can be nuance on how good a team has played. You don't always finish where you deserve to. You just don't. Things happen.
Just realised something. So United are obviously struggling.
Yeah.
Another team that's struggling that you've not mentioned yet is Spurs.
Yep.
So you perceive that Spurs starting 11 to be better than the United one?
Quite considerably, yeah.
This is going to be interesting.
Right, and I think that's a great place to stop for now. So we will give you part 2 in just a second. Well, actually, later in the week.
We'll such good timing because I need a week.
So do I. Just to fill in some gaps, let's get to 10th spot. In the brief break we've had, Nedum has moved Fulham from 11th to 10th, which leaves a space in 11th for
West Ham.
Okie dokie. And in 11th spot, I had Fulham, that I've revealed in part 1, which was fantastic. If you've not listened to that, maybe go back and listen to that first and come back. And Neve, in 11th spot, you have?
I've got Brighton.
Brighton.
Yeah. I don't know I've got Bournemouth and Brighton in 11 and 10.
Okay.
And I can't actually make a decision on who I want.
Battle of the Bees.
Who I want where.
Without Brentford, ironically. Okay. Brighton. Interesting.
The floor's yours.
Yeah. What is this? Is this like really low?
I'll tell you what. Let me read out the team first. I'll give you a minute. So 4-2-3-1 for the most used Brighton 11. You've got Verbruggen, Veltman, Van Hecke. Oh, Vizia, I've just realised. Dunk, Estupinian, Belieber, Ayari, Minte, Pedro, Mitoma, and Danny Welbeck, my guy. I think the big thing with Brighton that you can see is just a lot of depth. They've had 8 defensive midfielders this season. 8 different ones. Crazy. Hinshelwood's played all over the place. Rutter has played all along the forward line as well. So they've got a lot of versatility there when it comes to that 11. But you've got them in 12. Why have you got them in 12? Oh, 11th, sorry, my bad.
Yeah, 11th. I really do just think it's now getting to a point where like the 10 above, like the standard's getting higher and higher. I think this Brighton team as well, they're still adjusting to what they are. Like they made so many new signings, didn't they, in the summer? And we're just figuring out who's good, who's, you know what I mean, who's like really, really good, who should be in that 11. Like you say, depth is huge. I think from a mentality perspective, I've been really impressed with how they reacted to the huge loss that they had. Since then, they've been brilliant, which is impressive. And I imagine that they'll only get better. But in this current moment in time, I think we've got some solid set-up teams in the Premier League with players that have been there for a bit longer, and I just know more about them from a longer, bigger sample size.
I think you made a good point there. In terms of putting this together, the 10 is hard. The 10's really, really hard. I wonder, and as I say, we said at the start of this, it's kind of an exploration. I may have Brighton too high here because I've got them 5th.
Wow.
And I wonder if it's me, and I think maybe we're sort of seeing our workings out as we talk through it. I think what I'm doing sometimes with these guys is I'm kind of taking the moment, taking a bit of what's happened throughout the season, and then kind of looking at where they're trending at the same time. Like, and I'm trying to continuously trying to wash away the name and try and get to like how good are they. And I think I might have overstepped it a touch with this lot. I can't. The Brighton are tricky, aren't they? Because Brighton could beat anyone, couldn't they? But they could lose, or certainly draw against anyone as well. They had 6 big chances against Man City at the weekend. Like they've beaten some big teams this year. I had them in 5th. I'm going to keep them there for now because I've kind of got, that's my kind of workings. I think a lot of these players are going to go on to do great things. I think Estupinian, not someone that people talk about, but as a left back, I think he's one that he's got to be up there. I think he's been very, very consistent as a left back in this league. Pedro is really exciting. Welbeck, I think, never gets the respect he deserves. Mitoma's exciting. Maybe I've got them too high. What do you think, Nedum?
Yeah, it feels like it's too high, to be honest.
Yeah, fair enough.
Listen, it's just an opinion, though. That's just the way it feels. I had them in 9th. So as I see that 11 and the depth that you speak of, I see it to where if they had a really good season, they're in 7th. If they have a really bad season, they're probably in like 12th. That's as I see it. I don't see them being a team that's in the bottom third of the league. And for the style of play that they have with the young manager, like they can be super exciting. And we've seen them be on a heater now. You know, I think, was it 6 games in a row they won in the league? You know, that's credit to them with the 11 that they have, with the recruitment for like Rutter as well. They've got something there.
Depth will get you wins as well, which
100%.
helps you. Like I say, the midfielders. So Belieber, Ayari, Hinshelwood, Milner, Vifer, Gomez, Gilmore, and O'Reilly all played defensive midfielders. Yeah. So maybe I'm allowing the depth to infiltrate the 11 itself. I'd be intrigued to see how much money do you make from that 11. Verbruggen, Veltman, you're probably not getting that much.
What do you need to make the money for? What do you need to make the money for?
Well, I think it's just a good signifier for like where those players are going and the quality that they've truly got. I think that's what they're hoping for, isn't it? That's the Brighton model.
But then take away Lewis Dunk and Danny Welbeck from that team, and are they as successful? Because those are 2 players who are very experienced, who could be anchors within the way that the club operates.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
I do see Van Hecke. Like, I think Belieber will go and get a big move. I think Van Hecke, someone will take him at some point. I think he's really, really good. Pedro, I think, is really good.
And young as well.
Yeah.
Sneakily
maybe too high for me. Maybe too high for me. I think
you're the host. You could have just moved it. No, we didn't see it.
Yeah.
Did you see
As
it?
I say, there's no right or wrong answers here. 10th spot, I've got, and I'm in my second quartile now, although it only goes up to 7th. for some reason I've got another one. Forget it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I've got Bournemouth in 10th.
Okay.
We've spoken about Bournemouth a lot.
Yeah, same.
So we'll leave it there. When it comes to Bournemouth. Yep, Neve, you got them. And then Fulham, you got in 10th.
Yeah.
So Fulham better than Bournemouth. 9th spot. Brighton we have from Nedum.
Yep.
We've got Man United from Neve. I've got Nottingham Forest in 9th. I think the maturation of that Forest team, I think there's a lot of really good... I always quite like those players with that sort of pedigree that then go, look, here you go. This is just an example of success not being linear.
Who's that?
Take a second. Like Hudson-Odoi, Elliot Anderson, although I've got to see it was a bit of a financial loophole, let's say, when it comes to that. Elanga, those kind of players who kind of gone from the Man United, those guys. And I think sometimes there's this feeling that, like, because you've left those teams, that means you're not a quality player. And like I think Fulham have done that as a strategy, like really, really well as well. If you think of all the players that they've got in that team, the amount of them that have come from being squad players at Big Six sides.
Hot take for you.
Huh?
Hot take for you.
Cool.
The difference for Forest, I think it's the manager. I don't think it's the players. What do you make of that?
Do you think Nuno could achieve that with a different group of players?
I think Nuno's got a style of play which he likes. From speaking to one of my friends who works there, he says he's a good communicator.
Yeah, he seems like a good guy.
People understand what he requires from them, and he has a profile of play which suit that style, which is what we saw when he was at Wolves, for example. But it's obviously
finished 7th twice in a row.
Exactly. Like Wolves were playing in Europe, I believe. I think that's correct.
Yeah.
And it was with a style which is not too dissimilar in some ways to the way that, say, Forest play. Obviously, he's adapted over time because he's still, in the grand scheme of things, a young manager. But I think, look at the players that were there under the previous manager and what were they performing like? Why does Nottingham Forest feel like such a different club? And I think he came in, was it like nearly halfway through last year? They hadn't won, I think they'd won 2 games away from home in 18 months under the previous manager. And then the first result that he has as manager is going up to Newcastle, and I think they beat them by like 3 or 4, Chris Wood scoring a couple of goals.
Right.
So I think, for as good as the players are, I think the manager has been able to enable them.
And are you getting at, by that point, you mean as much tactically as like from a man management point of view, right?
I think there's more to that. And then the squad and the starting 11 by itself, they have obviously performed really well, but it's been very specific to the way the manager wants them to play.
Yeah.
So I think that comes into it as well.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's really
it's weird. I think because I originally had them 7th, and I've just now was tapping away at my phone because I've actually moved them into 8th.
Oh, corruption.
Right.
And it was actually just from chatting to you guys. I think 8th, I don't want to put them any different to that. I think I still want them to be quite high up because I think we're seeing certain players hit their like performance levels. So like Gibbs White, Anderson, Aina, we're sort of. I also think there's that as well. So I think that even though I do think the manager is the biggest component of it and creating a style that has led them to how high they are in the table, I also do think it's amalgamation of that and also players hitting that. They're hitting the age. This just seems to be where they're at, and they're hitting a really good level.
It's a lovely marriage, isn't it? It's totally worked. And we haven't spoken about the 2 centre backs like that. Milinkovic has been a really clever signing that works for the way that they're playing. Like we were talking about, I did a video where it's like one player to leave every team, right? And we said I put forward Dragusin, and part of the reason we put forward Dragusin was like he's not a bad centre back, but in this very like hyper-exposed Tottenham team, the way they were playing at the time, he just didn't really fit. And Milinkovic was actually linked with Tottenham in the summer as well. And you wonder what would be the feeling and the stock of Milinkovic if he was like in a team like that, where he's, you've got to do different things as opposed to at Nottingham Forest this season.
Do you know what it is as well? I feel like even though their style is obviously a certain way, and it's hard to work out how good they are as individuals based on a style like that, that almost takes away from how good they are in a way. Do you know what I mean? Like, so like players like Murillo, there was in one of the recent Forest games, there was a huge pass that was made, and Murillo got in front of it, and he just took it down. And his touch,
And
I was
he's 21.
like his
or something.
technical ability on the ball
Yeah.
in that moment. And I've seen a few times where he's been like that. And I'm like, yeah, okay, these guys are really good at the style that they're doing. But actually, I've seen glimpses of quality from them where I'm like, oh no, but they are just also really good footballers.
Yeah.
I think Anderson and Gibbs-White are two really good examples of that as well. Because like Anderson, because a big part of what he provides Forest is his engine, is the fact that he's very switched on in terms of when he needs to run back and help his defenders as well and get into that little space in behind. He fills it very quickly just with his presence when they're defending. But when he's got the opportunity to do the reverse and he makes those forward runs into the box, just that left-hand side of the box, his running's amazing and his quality of pass is amazing. So actually, I do think these players are better than people realise. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of back to both, isn't it? Because you've got to get the buy-in for people to, or if you can have people with talent that are willing to work hard as well, then you've really got something. Because they are willing and happy to defend at times. 8th spot. Okay, here we go. Tottenham. I've got
Tottenham as well.
Oh, okay, there we go. We can just move on.
What do we think of Tottenham? 8th.
what do we think of 8th?
I love
that. Neve, you've got Forest.
Yeah.
Okay, so I won't dodge it. I did put them above Man United.
How far above United are we talking?
What is that? 4 spots.
Because
let's figure it out. So Tottenham 4-3-3. Vicario, Porro, Romero, Dragusin, Udogi, Kulusevski, Sarr, Maddison, Johnson, Solanke, and Son. As I read that out, and maybe this is a blind spot for me. I feel like that is a better team than the Man United team with some glaring problems. Like if you were literally getting that team to go out and play. What's interesting, I didn't realise was, well, first of all, absentees. Van der Ven isn't in this team. Spence isn't in this team mainly down to the fact that, well, actually, overall his appearances aren't above Porro or Udogi, but he's played 6 starts on the left side, 3 on the right when it comes to the Premier League. Basuma's not in here. Bentancur's not in here. Bergval's not in here.
I've messed up.
Huh?
I've messed up.
You messed up?
Yeah, I've done mine based on like a best Tottenham 11 and not a most.
Not at most, okay.
My Tottenham position is so wrong now. Now that I'm hearing what their most used 11 has been this season, I've completely messed up.
Anyway, it was. Have you mentioned Maddison?
Maddison's in here, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, the midfield, like on this team, on this most used team, and again, look, I think you can understand what's revealing to me is the fact, not having Van der Ven in that overall the course of the whole season obviously is a bit of a problem. The midfield, there doesn't seem like there's the lockdown 6 there because Bentancur or Basuma aren't in that team and Sarr is instead. Just
really hard to work out what it's my fault. I've done it based. It's my fault for just thinking in my head about what. I don't know why. I just had it in my head that. But I think what it is for Spurs is, I know that injuries has been a huge problem for Spurs, but even when it's not because of injuries, I think the fact that they play with different players every time, I think. I almost think that's an issue in itself that Spurs have had this season that's maybe been overlooked because the more pressing matters have been other things.
Yeah.
But especially that midfield, I don't think Ange knows what midfield he wants to be his midfield.
I think that highlights, yeah, you're right. You're spot on. Like that highlights to me that he doesn't totally know what, the right midfield is. I think the reason I put Tottenham above Man United by so much is because they've thumped them twice. And I've watched those games. And when I've seen them, they've looked so much more cohesive than Man United. What will be interesting, if they can play each other in the Europa League final, who's the favourite going into that game if they both get to that final?
United.
He's trying to do it. Are you being seriously doing a bit?
No. Aside from having won trophies in the past, but like in terms of two teams, and we did a podcast a couple of weeks ago. I said it's impossible for Man United to get to the final. I just didn't see it, but but maybe. I mean, things happen, right? But I think Tottenham in the games that they've played against Man United have been far and away better than them.
Do you know, can I deviate away from something I think you said, Neve? Like, I think Ange knows the team that he wants to play, but throughout the season, like for example, Romero being in this most used 11, he's in there, but like he's also been missing for 4 months. You know.
Yeah. So he's played. So Draxon's played 14, Romero 13, Gray 10.
Do you know what I mean?
Van der Ven 9, Ben Davies 7, Danso 4.
There's a whole lot of nothing there, you know. And I think at times that was similar in the midfield because when he gets his like team out, he makes substitutions constantly. But I don't think he likes to deviate away from certain players. Like he trusts a few of them. So I think the Spurs fans themselves, I feel like they believe that they are very much like not spoken about properly. So every time I talk about them, I try and add that nuance because weirdly, I've got quite a few Spurs fans in my life.
Oh, right.
I don't know how that's come to be.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, but it's I think the injuries this year have been a real thing, and obviously the critique in terms of say the style of play is always going to be one which they can agree with, disagree with, and so on. But they know that a lot of the teams sorry, let me put it this way: any team that manager puts out, I ask myself, whatever the nature of the team is, if everyone was available, would the manager put that team out? And for Spurs, most of the season, I think the answer would be no.
Yeah.
And as a consequence, the manager's never really been able to pick the team that he wants. But if we class him as in terms of doing that, then I think we're missing the point.
I did this a while back when they were sort of in the worst of their run. And if you looked at, and it's obviously it's not all about XG, but it's about staying in a game sometimes, but also being able to create when you're not really being, at full flow. When you looked at Arsenal, who everyone's had a go at their creativity, they still, and through set pieces and things like that, they still stayed in the game, kept the XG low of the opposition, and won the XG battle, right? In most of their games. And so after that, you might win, you might lose, but you're in a better position because you've got into better positions. Tottenham, time and again, don't win the XG battle, and so like for them, in terms of how good they are, there's a style problem as much as a talent problem, because I think there's at their best there's quite a nice ceiling there, but as you say, like we've not always seen that team. But then the variance is,
I think a big problem is that some of their most exciting standout players are players that probably shouldn't have played the amount of minutes that they've played already as well. And
at
we've
the
now
intensity that they play
got a perception of what we want from them going forward and the minutes we want them to have. But realistically, in the summer, signings should be made so that their game time next season is reduced. For example, Archie Gray and Bergvall. But I would like to put in a request, and I'm sorry to be a burden.
Hang on a second.
I've messed up because I had it in my head that the 11. I had a better 11 in my head than that for most used.
Bye.
I would like to put Tottenham to 11 and just push everyone forward one place that's above them.
Okay. Right.
It's controversial.
So that's now set off, for God's sake. What have we done here?
So
you want to put them in 11th. So Brighton go down up to 10th.
Yeah, and then everyone just goes at one position.
Okay, this is analog, but I'll make that work.
It's distinctly analog, yeah.
So I've got Tottenham, which, let me know. We've got comments on Spotify and, of course, on YouTube. I'm sure you will. Let me know if I've got Tottenham totally wrong. But you're not allowed to comment if you're an Arsenal fan or London-based fan or a Tottenham fan.
Or if you've ever used the word Spursy.
Or if you use the word Spursy, good point.
Yeah.
Illegal. So I won't be commenting.
Yes.
7th. 7th, I've got... So you've got Man United in 7th.
I have.
So you have Nottingham Forest now in 7th.
Yeah.
Move people along.
She's trying to figure it out now.
Back to me. I've got Newcastle in 7th. Now, I'm just trying to kind of dampen the Newcastle hype and enjoyment of them winning the trophy, which I thoroughly enjoyed personally. This is their 11. And Newcastle I struggled with here. Really struggled with where to put them. Pope's 4-3-3. Pope, Livramento, Shah, Byrne, Hall, Guimaraes, Tonali, Joelinton, Murphy, Isak, and Gordon. I'm struggling. Why have I put them there? Why have I put them there?
Why not?
I think the thing, do you know, it's really unfair, but I guess kind of maybe overall talent wise, and again, I hate saying this as I'm saying it. I was looking at Murphy.
Listen,
and
what you do is what everyone does. The sort of like,
but he works so hard,
and
he's so important.
He does literally well for them. The manager picks him every week, but then everyone's like, yeah, but it's only Murphy though.
I know, and I think him and Isak have got maybe the best combination like in the Prem, or like something like that. There's 9
Murphy,
times.
It's only Murphy. It's just a Premier League player playing week in, week out for Newcastle.
Yeah, it's a very well put together team.
I like the midfield.
It is a great midfield.
It's so weird with Newcastle because shall I maybe keep to myself where I put them?
No.
I'd actually like some help here. So no, tell me where you're going to put them.
So I put them 4.
I don't hate that.
I have put them 4, and but it's hard for me to work out. Do I really love that Newcastle team because of how good the players are, or because I think it's just really balanced?
Yeah.
Don't you think? Look at Newcastle. I said this all season. I just think the midfield in itself is just great balance. But then you also look at like Gordon and Hall, Murphy and Livramento. The balance, I love, like, for example, when I know you've mentioned Isak and Murphy, like, and their sort of partnership, but then Isak goes over to with Gordon, and that space that in matches I've watched that's opened up on that right hand side, and I think Murphy's run into space brilliantly throughout the season on that right hand side.
Yeah,
and
he has.
It's just the way they play, the way that Gordon and Hall, when Gordon's had to play with Livramento, the way that the relationship they've built, I just think the midfield relationships between players, I think it's really lended itself, that balance, to lots of little relationships on the pitch for Newcastle that have just worked so well throughout the season.
Yeah, do you know what? I might have to swap them about here because I agree with you. The balance is there. Livramento is a joke in the League Cup final. Like he's really good.
Yeah, he is.
Really, really good. And the midfield 3, just like the one thing I've heard Newcastle fans talk about is like sometimes, like, you know, at their best they're brilliant, but when they're just a touch off it and lethargic, they're just super. It's like so disappointing because you've seen that. Why can't you be like that all the time? But like Isak's one of the best. You know, he's obviously top 2 strikers in the league. Gordon maybe not been outrageous with his form this year, but he's still a huge threat. I think I might have got that wrong, so I might have to come back to that. Niamh, who have you got in? I know we've done that, haven't we? That's gone down. Hang on, let me get my arrow here. 6th spot.
Villa.
Where did I put Villa? I've got Villa currently in 6th spot.
I've got Villa currently in 6th spot.
So maybe I'm right with Villa. Maybe
Look at us.
Yeah.
Look at us.
Ooh, I know what my swap can be.
You sure?
Brighton and Newcastle. Yeah, that's my swap. Okay, I'm doing it.
So where's that? Sorry,
So
Brighton.
I'm putting
where?
Newcastle up to 5th, Brighton down to 7th.
Again, I think Newcastle's next step is depth, and that'll have to just come with time as they're allowed to spend more and more money.
Yeah.
It's a shame. I think it's a shame that they had to sell Elliot Anderson. That one specifically.
And Minter as well.
Yeah,
like,
Minter too.
Right,
but I think
because Murphy's rubbish, isn't he?
Anderson's the one that's the real shame, though, because he's a big Newcastle fan as well.
I know.
Do you know what I mean?
He was celebrating, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was there, which I thought was really nice that
Yeah,
they'd
nice.
been allowed to go to that. But I just think for them now, it's just about being patient and just adding to that squad that depth so that they can be more consistent. But the issue that they've got, and I think the fact that they've won a trophy has really helped them, but they've got to get themselves into Champions League, is got to keep all those players.
Yeah. I'm intrigued to see how it's big. Yeah, it's big summer for them.
Because I think those players really like playing for Newcastle.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of players there that should be playing Champions League football.
Do you know what I had as well? Their average age for that cup final was like the oldest you've sort of seen, apparently. 29.
Newcastle?
Yeah.
Really?
So,
yeah, the average age was 63.
yeah. You retired too soon.
Yeah.
But
Still
yeah,
tough.
I think with that, there were big moments for a lot of players. But some of those players are going to go, aren't they? So it's.
Which ones?
I think Trippier goes, doesn't he? In time. Who else was in there? Who's a bit older? Pope. I wonder if they can improve on.
Okay.
Dare I say it?
Who else?
Why are you doing this to me? The
My sort
Shaw
of point is like
another one.
is the
Murphy, get him out.
is the likes of Botman and Joe Linton and Bruno and Isak and Gordon. I don't think it'd take much to keep Lewis Hall. I don't think it'd take much to keep these players. I think they really enjoy playing for Newcastle.
Yeah.
And
but
they are
I
playing,
also
aren't they? They're starting.
do think that they are players that are capable of Champions League football. So you want them to be doing that at Newcastle. And then you expand on them. I don't think you want to be in a situation where... But then obviously then there's the middle ground of, is there an asset there that you can let go? And then you take it from there. But even that, who would it be? So because they're all kind of as useful and as passionate as each other.
If I could give you 120 million for Isak, or I'll give you 70 for Bruno, which one do you want? You get to keep the other one.
What, 120 or 70?
But you lose Isak, or you lose Bruno. So those are the,
those are the two. Those are two that are the non-negotiables. Like you need to just keep them
if you want to.
You have to say no to both. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's more. I'd
Well
say
dodged.
if you were to pick one big asset at Newcastle, that for the greater good of the future, you let them go for a big fee. Which one is it then? Which one's the most? Which one's the one that you'd
turn that on me? I gave you the exact same question, just formed in a different way, and you didn't answer it. You just
There's
thrown
other
it back
players
to
that
me.
you can throw into the mix.
Oh, what? But it can't be those two.
No, it could be those two, but I just personally think those two are the two that I would advise you not to. I'd be looking to keep those two.
Nedum?
I didn't know my mic was working. I thought you were just having a lively discussion.
Look, I think Isak. If I give you 150 for Isak,
Well, you just turned it into 150.
yeah, I'm bumping it up. 150 for Isak.
I mean, 150 is a whole...
Shake my hand?
Yeah, 150 million. It depends to what club.
Ooh.
Does it?
Yeah. Because I would...
You worried about Sunderland? Is this the issue?
He goes abroad. Yeah.
If it was like abroad...
He's over 24.
I think 100... I do actually think as incredible as Isak is, I think look at his like injury record. If you were offered 150 million by a club abroad, so it's not your direct rival, when there's players out there like Osimhen floating around, who you can get for a lot less than that,
Yeah.
I think you would have to say yes to that because that can then improve the other players in your team.
Yeah, true.
But it would have to be like that volume of money.
How did we get here? I thought we were talking about Villa.
Yeah, sorry.
Three of us had Villa in
it's
6.
tough.
We're talking
I
about
was-
selling Isak now.
I think I'd shake your hand as well. That's a lot of money. So Villa. Yeah, Villa have got in 6th spot. They've got the good solid squad there. The most used 11 is... Here it is. 43-1, you got Martinez, Cash, Konza, Torres, Digne, or Dean, or however you bloody say it, Anana, Tillemans, Bailey, Rogers, Jacob Ramsey, and Watkins. Absentees, Kamara. Duran only started 4 games, so everyone knows. And John McGinn kind of has played pretty much everywhere. But it's just very, very solid team there with a lot of players that you can kind of stick by. No Kamara in there.
Well, that most used defence, it fascinates me because even though that, like, I'm not disputing that's the most used defence, I think the issue that Villa have had is there's been quite a few games where that's not been the defence, no?
Yeah, so
there's been a lot of games where Consa's played on the right.
Yeah, so Consa's played 6 games on the right.
It's because he had the Diego Carlos start.
Diego Carlos played 8. Yeah, Tyrone Mings has played a few. Disasi's played a few as well. Maatsen, you've got as a left back cover. He's only played 4 games though. Dean's been playing for the bulk of the season. So yeah, I think overall their squad depth is really, really strong. It's interesting though, isn't it? You'll be going on about that Newcastle back line. Obviously, we haven't got Botman in that one, but Cash and Luca Dean, I think you'd swap the fullbacks, wouldn't you? Yeah, I'd rather have Newcastle's fullbacks.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then the midfield, Anana, Tillemans. Like that Newcastle, obviously, I guess the third name is they have a different system, but it's tight between Newcastle and Villa there. It is really, really tight. But actually, I think, I'm on Newcastle all of a sudden.
Yeah, I saw your video the other day.
Yeah.
You got soft.
Yeah, I know. And I literally started this whole segment going, I'm trying to calm down on the hype.
Spent 5 minutes talking about Newcastle while talking about Villa.
Yeah. Like, similar problem with the Villa thing of like, for them moving forward, if they don't get in the Champions League this year, do you think that's... do you think they could, with the quality they've got, they could actually really do really well this next season without that? But I guess they'll have... I mean, it depends if they get into Europa League, doesn't it?
For me...
Where are they going?
When we're talking about Villa, we're talking about a team that has played in the Champions League now this season. So next year, if you're talking about them kicking on, like what's the next stage from kicking on when you've already qualified for the Champions League? Are you thinking, can they win a title?
I think it'd be interesting. Like, the pressure of Champions League, but I think maybe I'm wrong here because you're still going to have to play games. You're going to have to be in the Europa League, and so I'm just trying to see what is the progression for Villa.
It's a fascinating question because I think I could be so wrong, but I get the impression that the big stumbling block for Villa now is actually not about players, it's about mentality, and it's this idea that they don't play like a team that think they should be high at the table. So they might go. They've had some great results in the Champions League against top teams. They've had some great results in the Premier League against top teams. But then all of a sudden there's a heck of a lot of games against teams that you'd expect them to go and take control, take over, assert themselves as by far the better team. We're a team that's up here. We go and beat Bayern Munich in the Champions League. This is what we're all about. But they go in there with the attitude that they probably had against Bayern Munich, but to the Crystal Palace, like in that Crystal Palace game, for example. Sort of, I feel like they need to sort of get to a stage now where it comes naturally to them that they are one of the top teams. And until they do that, I don't know if it's to do with maybe the tactics or the way Emery sets out, if he's quite sort of on the side of caution for every single game. But I would like to see maybe now if he has like an alternative approach, not an alternative tactical approach, but an alternative way of approaching a game against the teams that they ought to be picking up points and beating. That means that they get those points.
Yeah, I guess it's about. See, that's what's interesting. I think what maybe you're trying to say is like the ability to overpower those teams that you should be winning, who've come for a draw. Like again, when we've this whole podcast kind of discusses it, is the fact that it's so competitive. Like
I think before a ball's kicked, Aston Villa play Crystal Palace, you would expect Aston Villa to win that game. But because of the way Aston Villa,
we think that's just a Villa Park.
Yeah, neutral ground. I get what you mean.
Home,
being at home makes a difference.
Okay.
My point sort of, that I'm making with it is that when a ball is kicked, first 15 minutes of the game, regardless of where it is, I think Villa, the way that Villa play, invites Palace to think that they are just as likely to get the 3 points as Villa. Whereas I don't think that's how it should be looking at that Villa team. I think and I'm not disrespecting Crystal Palace with that. I was just using them as an example because that was a game that I'd noticed because where I was really disappointed by Aston Villa. I don't know. I can't really. I don't think I'm explaining my point very well.
No. I think I get what you mean. I think that's the thing is that there's a difference between being in this pack of Brighton, Newcastle, like that. We had it at the start of the season. I had these little different areas, and I had Brighton, Villa, Newcastle, Tottenham in the same spot initially, because there's the other guys that you just really, really, really should be in that top four. And things happen, right? But for Villa, the next step for them is for them to be pushing third. Like really kind of having a go, and to do that, you've got to go and play those teams that are in those next two quartiles and just blow them away. Like there's different ways of it. Like Liverpool, to go back to them, like under Klopp, there was they got to a point where they could beat anyone, but they were still drawing games they shouldn't be drawing. And then the next year they moved it along where they were absolutely destroying those guys. And then because you only get 3 points for a win, so like it doesn't matter who you're playing. Mm-hmm. It's all good and well beating a top team. If you draw the next one, it means a lot less, doesn't it? Mm. Did you have Villa sixth? Did you?
Yeah, all three of us. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What do you think about? Yeah. What do you think about Villa?
I like them. I've seen them in the flesh a couple of times, and I like the structure in which they play. But then also, they sort of like the nature of the opposition can dictate how it looks sometimes. Because say, for as big as they are as a club, and say the position that they're in, I think at times they do still prefer being an underdog. Which is why I like when they go and play a certain style against like teams who are trying to win league titles and so on, the Bayern Munichs of this world. They can find ways to be defensively solid and then find something perhaps in transition. But transition is a lot harder when people don't commit as many bodies forward against you as, say, another team would. Right. And I think being a front runner is something that not every team... being a front runner, I believe, is something that teams aspire to be, but not many teams know how to do.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
Because let's put it this way. Say, for example, Liverpool as a brand, as a club, for everything that they are, wherever they go, all the teams that play against them will want to beat them. It was similar in case of, say, City these last 4 years, similar to like United or whatever. So the version that you'll get from the opposition is going to be a really strong version because that's a big game for them.
Yeah.
Like Liverpool versus Palace. We'll name Palace again. Palace catching strays all the time. Like, it might not be Liverpool's biggest game in the season, but for Palace, that could be a huge scalp, especially if it's like at home, away from home, whatever. So they'll play it in a manner which will probably play differently to another side who's in a similar position to them. So I think like Villa's biggest strength, to be honest, for as good as the players are, with the addition of Asensio, with Rashford, with Marlon as well, like that's good. I think Emery's ability to see a game and read a game and make changes as and when, I think that's something that'll continue to grow within that squad. And for times where they struggled, I think for maybe like 5 or 6 match weeks in the Champions League where they'd play a midweek game and then lose at the weekend, I think that changes the next season because they've had the experience and now the manager's messaging that he gives to them, I think they'll understand it a bit more clearly.
I think the big thing that will help them next season is if they can get a consistent back four in place. Because I think a big part of their game that can be so successful, for example, is the offside trap that they set as well. And I think they can have those little bits that make their game so good if they've got a consistent team playing it, for example.
Okay, 5th spot. Top 5. I had Brighton, but we swapped that round, so I've got Newcastle now.
As do I.
Well played, guys. Well played.
As do I.
Say that club's name again.
What did I say? Brighton.
Newcastle. I think it said Newcastle.
It's interesting that the difference between a southerner
Newcastle.
and northerners saying
Newcastle, yeah.
So do you put the emphasis on new, whereas northerners put the emphasis on Castle. Newcastle.
Right, got you.
You're saying it like it's an actual, like a new castle.
Brand new castle. Yeah. 2 up, 2 down.
What a guy.
It's funny. I put in an offer on a Newcastle for myself today, actually.
Well, congrats.
Hasn't been accepted yet. Yeah. We'll find out. So, Neve, who you got in 5th?
Chelsea.
Ooh, I nearly sang the song.
Yeah, stop it. Fire away, Neve.
Interesting. I have Chelsea higher than that.
Where? Before I say it, where have you guys got Chelsea?
I've got Chelsea 3rd.
I've got Chelsea 4th.
So, because I did originally had them 4, but then at the last minute I made the adjustment. I put Newcastle 4, Chelsea 5, and the reason why is in the end is because similar to something that we've alluded to a few times in this podcast is sometimes you have just got to take the name away and the excitement of the name and just look at what the player is. And I can't see a world in which on paper I couldn't put Chelsea above Newcastle. I actually couldn't do it. I could be totally wrong with that, but I couldn't do it.
I mean, yeah, I think it's super tight. So this is the team: 4-2-3-1. Sanchez, Gusto, Adebayo. So Adebayo sneaks in there, by the way. Fofana's got 10 games at time of recording. Adebayo's got 11. Colwill, Cucurella, Caicedo, Fernandes, Madueke, Palmer, Sancho, and Jackson. Lavia's not in there. Lavia's only 8 games.
Such a shame.
I don't get. Yeah,
he's going to be so good if he can just be fit.
Yeah,
and get minutes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree. I could not agree more. Yeah, they've had ups and downs in form. You've got a lot of players themselves have had up and downs in their careers, like Sanchez, Caicedo when he first rocked up. Fernandes had a few moments. Cucurella certainly has. Sancho certainly has. Palmer's going through a bit of a.
The problem Chelsea have got is they've got like an abundance of talent, but when it comes to it playing that 11, you are only as good as the players that are you're not as good players. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like that's their issue. So, for example, going forward, Palmer can be as good as Palmer is, but Jadon Sancho. Now, I read a stat that you could fact check just to make sure, but I read a stat that Sancho hasn't had a shot on target since Boxing Day.
I don't know. How am I supposed to how am I supposed to find that now?
Google Google.
So he's had shots, just not shot on target. If we're talking stats, I heard a stat from someone the other day that United, I don't know, maybe you've seen this. United, if they've been leading at half-time at Old Trafford, they have not lost in the league since the early 80s.
Yeah, I saw.
Is that a real thing?
Well, I don't know when I don't know if it's the early 80s, but there was, whenever there's a game on Sky, they always have they have that graphic of leading at half time, and they always have the amount of games, and it is like a lot of games.
Yeah,
it's obscene.
astronomical. Yeah,
I just read that stat, and it was, I don't usually use stats, but it is something that I've noticed in the last few months with Sancho, where I have thought that sort of,
where's the output, basically?
Desire to get in there and have shots and whatever, it just was missing. And it was just, I'd seen something of it, and I just thought, oh, that kind of matches up. But my point really is that, like, Palmer, because he's like the big name, and because there's an expectation level of him, because of the standards he set, he might start to get flack from people throughout the year if he's not hitting that. But I almost question if it is because of him, or if it's not. It's an amalgamation of the players in front of him not being particularly consistent, and also maybe all of them could be victims of the system just not really suiting them too much, like the way that Maresca wants the wingers to play, the structure that he wants the team to have. And it's interesting because at Leicester, this was something that was quite noticeable actually with Maresca, is even though Leicester obviously did well to get promoted, there was still something in the back of your mind where you thought there's a bit of a stubbornness to Maresca here, and there's games where he could be changing and he's not, and in interviews he's like very much a certain way, and that was why I was very hesitant that he would have success at Chelsea. But it did start off well, so you're almost like, well, eating your words. But we're now actually starting to see it at Chelsea, what we saw at Leicester, where he's got a sort of his way or no way approach, and it's impacting certain players. And I can't work out now whether or not Maresca's downplayed, I think, those Chelsea players on a number of occasions.
Yeah.
Like, even when they've done well, he's wanted us all to just not get carried away.
Yeah.
I almost feel like he's done it too many times.
Yeah, I agree. I think he went way too far down that road, and I think you missed an opportunity there where he could reassess history if they'd sort of gone for it and run out of steam. You would have gone, well, look at this, look how young these lads are. But I think, I agree with tactically. It seems like the tempo has really kind of calmed down. I do sometimes wonder. You've got a lot of players who have been told they're good, have gone for big money, think they're good, are at a big club, and I feel like they're never gonna. Like with how bad they got before, it's one where like they're never going to go down, but if they're not reaching the heights that they want, then they maybe don't kind of stick at it as much as maybe they could do. I put them high because I just think there's a lot of talent as I'm going through that team. I think there's a couple of problems. Problems is really harsh, but like in terms of being third on this list, Sanchez is one where maybe shouldn't be there. Adarabioyo, ideally you'd have Fofana in that team. But then after that, I really like, and I think Cucurella's had a good season for them, like obviously in a slightly different role, but like Caicedo, Fernandes, Madueke I'm a big fan of.
Would you be willing to real quickly now rustle up a combined Newcastle and Chelsea 11? Because I think it's fascinating that you've got, because I want to, maybe I'm wrong. So goalkeeper, taking Newcastle, I think you choose Newcastle.
Yep.
And then both fullbacks.
I think Gusto is very good, actually. I know people aren't sure about it. Also, Reece James.
This season, both fullbacks, I think you choose Newcastle. I think you choose Livramento and Hall over Gusto and Cucurella. Even Cucurella, who I think started the season really well. I think he's a great left
definitely
back.
an argument. There's definitely an argument.
But I think Hall's been like top 3 in the league.
Mm-hmm.
Then centre-backs. Personally, I think this is something that Chelsea have struggled in the centre back department this season.
I really believe in Colwell. I do believe in Colwell. I think he's.
Whether I don't. Jury's out for me. I don't know. I'm not going to question like his future.
Yeah.
However, at this current moment, he doesn't. I'm not assured by him, if I'm honest.
Yeah, fair enough. I just think, and again, like there's you're contradicting yourself throughout in this, and I know I certainly have done. But
that midfield three, as it's.
But I mean, that midfield three is Caicedo, Fernandes, and Palmer. That's pretty good.
Versus Tonali, Joelinton, and Bruno. I think that you're splitting hairs with a lot of that.
Yeah, fair enough. I think
I would personally take the Newcastle. If you were to take them as a 3,
yep.
I would take the Newcastle as a 3.
You know how much this pains me to do this, but I would probably take the Chelsea 3.
So
Would you?
You'd both take the Chelsea as a 3.
I think so.
Madueke Sancho, like it shows.
So let's say so you'd say I suppose you definitely put Bruno in there. You would definitely put Bruno in there.
Yeah, ideally, yeah. I'd swap Fernandes out and I'd put Bruno in.
And you'd have Palmer and Caicedo.
Yeah.
I would have Palmer, Bruno, and at this current moment, I'd have Tonali.
Okay.
Or would I have Caicedo?
So many options.
Neve, I'm going to have to stop you there because you're derailing the podcast again. Okay.
I like Chelsea as well, just because they're just young. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
I just think the potential is there. Like, surely, that's why I keep looking at it. I go, surely that's at some point those players are going to mature.
When you say potential, then you like rubbing your fingers. Is that to say to be sold or potential to be good? Was that
to
magic
be
or was that money?
amortized in a satisfying fashion?
Okay.
Maturation.
I guess,
yeah.
yes.
I don't know. Like I just Chelsea. Maybe I'm sort of giving them more kudos because despite this having Adebayo in there, which I'm hammering Adebayo, which is it's cruel.
Yeah,
I just like a lot of players on that team. It's just not totally clicked
team,
together.
and I think to be fair, 5. It's not exactly like I put them in the relegation. Like I've still put them 5th, but I think 3rds definitely should surprise me.
Okay.
Yeah, I think between 5th and 4th, like even in the league table right now, they are basically between 5th and 4th, and they'll be separated by a point if Newcastle win the game in hand. So basically, we're saying they're kind of the same, just look a bit different.
So in 4th, I have Manchester City.
What?
It's think about this. The 11. It's about the 11.
So
you'll see.
Yes, this is really important. 4-1-4-1. Ederson, Rico Lewis, Diaz, Akanji, Gvardiol, Kovacic, Gundogan, Savinho, Silva. Would be the other way around. Doku, and Haaland is the most used 11. Absentees, which I thought was so revealing. Walker, obviously, it's kind of come to an end and he's gone. Rodri, Stones, De Bruyne, and Foden's not in this team because he's been everywhere. He's played on the left, he's played through the middle, he's played on the right, he's played in midfield. It's, how many have we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different positions. So when you take out Walker, Rodri, Stones, De Bruyne, Foden, if you think about how important they have been, that team, which still has a lot of quality, it's got that midfield it has no legs in it. Doku has struggled, I think, this year. Look, you've still got an outrageous striker in Haaland, obviously, and they're all good. Gvardiol's a joke as well, although he's had a couple of memeable moments, which is part of the course when you're playing left back, I think, in world football. And Lewis has had a tough year this year.
Yeah, yes.
It's that's why I kind of snuck them underneath Manchester City.
Underneath who?
Chelsea. Sorry.
I was going to say they're under themselves. That's how dead they are.
In a way, they are. Convinced me to.
Oh,
Neve, don't do this.
Just like
what I'm
saying.
No,
Newcastle on the way.
No,
Newcastle won the league.
Oh, yeah, man.
Definitely not convinced me to put them below Newcastle or Chelsea. I think I still.
So they're in your. I'm getting
because
the feeling
I'm thinking the. Yeah, I was thinking that the Newcastle. To be fair, because Newcastle have their own injuries and their availability 11. Yeah, no, I'm going to keep them. I'm just walking in.
You're thinking out loud. So yeah, I've got Man City in 4th. Nedum's got Chelsea. Neve's got Newcastle currently, but things could change as we've seen. In 3rd spot, I've got Chelsea. Nedum, I'll come to you. Who have you got 3rd?
I've got City 3rd.
Yeah, that's where I would like to put City as well. That's where I've been convinced.
Manchester City? There's lots of cities, no?
I'm from Manchester, so I'm talking about City. Yeah, I think given the players that have been unavailable for them and the importance, like we're talking about, some people moan about it, but their Ballon d'Or winner hasn't played all season. When you think about the impact that he had last year and how he can sort of affect all those around him, like him alongside Kovacic is different to Kovacic there by himself, And you mentioned Rico Lewis as well, who I think is a good player, but he's played more football this year than he did last year. because he's been available. And also, Kyle Walker not being in the team, like everyone saw the year that he was having. And so many injuries and stuff that they've had throughout that time have led to dips in form from certain people. And as we approach the end of the season, like as we talk right now, Stones might be out for the season, Akanji might be out for the season, Ake might be out for the season. But those guys haven't played more than like 4 or 5 games in total back-to-back in the season anyway.
Yeah.
So I think as I look back at, say, the success that they've had in years gone by, continuity has been something which has mattered a lot because it matters to everyone, as is why, we'll probably see 1 and 2 be the way that we see it. So for them, with that, if that was to be the 11 that was going to start the whole season, I don't think they'd be contending for a title. But I still think they're doing a bit better than they're doing now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's interesting. I think Rico he's been hurt by not having Rodri, I think, as well.
Everyone
All
has.
of them have, of course, you're right.
Has, yeah.
There was Kai found this stat about progressive passes. In terms of who's had the most progressive passes since the start of last season, it's still Rodri. And he's not been playing the whole year.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, no. I think it's progressive carries, it might be. So that it shows like just getting on the ball, and even at that fear factor of the opposition going, right, Rodri's got it, let's get back.
Yeah.
Like that has
I think one of the best things about Rodri is, like, for as good as we saw him play, it's the fact that he can complement so many others within that system. I think even this year as well, the transitions that they're getting hit on, like, and the shots that come from it, I think the numbers are quite high.
Yeah.
But then even in regards to that, I'm not going to say, it's not as if Rodri's like the quickest defensive midfielder in the world either, but it's just the way that he plays in that role, which allows others to be complemented, like himself and Gundogan, or whether it's himself, Kovacic, himself, De Bruyne, himself and the forwards.
So in the summer, what do you do about Stones and De Bruyne?
I think De Bruyne, it feels like it's maybe reached a natural conclusion if his contract's up.
So a harder part to this, the Club World Cup goes across June and July. So contracts finish on the 30th of June. So how do you
1 month
that?
Extension?
Yeah. Can we have it for another 3 weeks?
I don't know. Like, I guess at some point, what is it? Queckie always says, if you're not fit, you're not it. The best ability is availability. Like, you've got to, those players need to be available for them.
It's almost like we're realising, like, just how good they are in their omission as well. Like, I think those 3 specifically, KDB, Stones and Rodri. I think Stones actually is someone I've come to really realise, like, wow.
Yeah. And I think I get you back to your point. I think having Rodri means that De Bruyne doesn't have to have to do those runs because you've got someone who's gone, I'll get it. Like, having that player defensively to do that sometimes, and then just overall control means that De Bruyne gets on the ball more often in the positions he wants to get into and can do what he's great at.
And like the dip in form of Kyle Walker as well needs to be spoken about. Because that was a dip that not many people would have anticipated to be at that sort of scale. And to make it worse, he was the captain.
I've always wondered this. Like, maybe it's the time for another time I'll ask this question. People remind me to ask this question. That I'm always intrigued about once you're in your 30s, and then there is this, like, people want to throw that at you, this idea that you sort of fall off in some way, but just how kind of true that is, or how much that's the kind of, like,
I can't work out of Walker though is how much of, like, the last however many years of Walker being a big part of that team, like it's how much of it was I'd love to know how much speed really did aid him in a sense of making decisions. Like, there was a bit of analysis that I saw about City this season when he was there, and his starting point when City had the ball, sort of in anticipation of them losing it, his starting point was such a poor starting point, and he gave himself so much running to do to get back.
Right.
Was this something has this always been a thing of Walker, and speed just bailed him out, or is that wrong?
That's a good question. It's a very good question, and there's a very, very long answer attached to it. So, do you want it now? Or do you want it?
I think we'll have to. We need to do Arsenal Liverpool.
Yeah.
Times are ticking. I'm afraid.
Neve, we'll put a pin in that one.
Yeah,
but that's a good question.
Thanks, guys.
Really good. No, we just both feel bad because we've got to move on. It is a good question. So, final 2, we're there. But which way will it be? There are 2 teams available. There's Arsenal and there is Liverpool. So, my top 2 is I have Arsenal in second, and I have Liverpool top.
I think that's fair. Same for me.
Same for you?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't originally.
Oh. Really?
But
What, mid-pod? Is that a change?
No, it's not a mid-pod change. I just... Do you know what's really weird? I didn't want to put Liverpool won
Why?
because I think squad. But then I've remembered for a second. Actually, we're dealing with an 11, aren't we?
Yeah.
Whereas, like, because when it comes to like a squad of players that a team has got available, that was my hesitant sort of thing with Liverpool.
Yeah.
But then when you actually look at the criteria of the 11, I almost think that sums up maybe how Liverpool have won the season, is the fact that they've probably had a core group of about 14 players that have just been able to play every single week. And the 11 they can field from that is number one. So it is right to put them one. So I have put them one.
So that's a great point. So Liverpool, they're 11 here, and they have had injuries along the way at different times, but not to the extent of Arsenal. But Alisson, Trent, Konate, Virgil van Dijk, Robertson, Gravenberch, McAllister, Salah, Szoboszlai, Gakpo, Diaz. That, I think when a team wins a league, that you have that team in your head to go. And I think that's pretty much it. And to your point, Niamh, in terms of players that have played more than 10 games this year, it is that team. And then Diaz, who's played... Have I got Diaz? No, sorry. And then Jota is the only other one. So to your point, that's exactly it. Like it has been consistent to a point. One thing I found interesting, I was just sort of messing about. I was thinking about, I guess, the fact that they haven't had that out-and-out striker. You've had 10 games with Jota through the middle, 10 games with Diaz, 8 with Nunez. It's going to be interesting to see if they continue down this road with Diaz, or do they want that out-and-out striker that everyone always wants? Because Gravenberch is outside the top 30% for passes received. They're not. I think that's because they're going to Konate or they're going to Trent. They want to go over to that right-hand side. As much as anything else.
When was the last time Liverpool had a focus through the 9?
I mean, I guess. Well, do you want to chuck Firmino in that? But again, because you were looking for Mane, weren't you? Really,
exactly.
A lot of the time, it's been a long, long time.
Exactly, and this is like in this whole football community having discussions about stuff. I remember at the time when City were being discussed and criticised about playing like a false 9 and not having a 9 through the middle, but at the same time, like Firmino was playing like a loosely false 9 for Liverpool.
Yeah.
And they were doing just fine. I think there are different ways to try and do it, and if the focus is the focus, but in reality, like to get back to the point, like, because we can mention Arsenal. Did you say the Arsenal team?
So here's the Arsenal team, which is, interesting, isn't it? So Arsenal 4-3-3, Raya, Timber on the right, Saliba, Gabriel, Calafiori, Odegaard, Partey, Rice, Saka, Havertz, Trossard. So the absentees, big ones, Martinelli and Ben White.
Yeah.
I think it's closer than you think with that. Look, now I'm hearing that as well. I think with the Liverpool one, do you know what I think the difference is? As an 11, I think that's really tight.
I agree.
But I think the difference is Salah.
Yeah.
That is literally the difference.
I think Salah, you could argue, is the difference between them winning this league this year and not.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think for this Premier League title, it's him, isn't it?
Yeah, and that doesn't, you're not taking credit away from, they're all important players. Of course they are. But in terms of that X factor to get yourself a goal and assist, which he's done so many times, or just conjure up a moment like he's loving that Travella this year, like the assists have gone through the roof. Yeah, it's one of the all-time greatest seasons. I know he's had a disappointing game against PSG and a disappointing game against Newcastle, but you can't get away from the fact of how integral he's been, and also how Arsenal have struggled without Saka, because Saka's so.
Do you think Saka? Do you think if Saka had not got injured, do you think it would be much tighter the title race right now?
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't think it would necessarily be like point for point as such, but I think like we'd seen for the last 3-4 years, Saka basically never miss a game.
Yeah.
And we've seen Arsenal be pretty good. We've seen Arsenal get a ton of points. So when he's out there, like this is like the opposite of like the Bournemouth situation, where at times it feels like players are interchangeable. But for teams like Arsenal, like Arteta at times would be criticised for playing the same team over and over and over and over. So if that's the case, you don't recruit someone to say be as good as someone that always starts if they're not going to start, because they know they're not going to play.
Do you know what I think a big issue is? And if Saka had been fit, that would have, the only presentable issue in terms of the title race would be the role that Liverpool were able to put Salah in this season, and the way they've constructed a team that allows Salah to get into the box and play the way he's played. I think even when Saka was available, like I think back to the Newcastle game, and his bit of magic was that he could have the ball on the sideline and send like a perfect cross into the box. No one was getting on it though. And I saw quite a few games where Saka did that, and that's one of his special things. He's absolutely unbelievable at sending that ball into like the perfect area in the box, but nobody was converting it. And so I even question if Saka was with us. If
Sounds like he's died there.
Yeah, I don't know why I worded it like that. That was poor. If I still think that that's what Arsenal needed, is one more person.
In a minute month away,
to sort of like loosely counter though, like Arsenal get criticised for not having a number 9, and the criticism can be whatever it is. But last year they scored 89 goals in the Premier League. That's an obscene amount of goals without the perceived idea of having someone that is going to be that person. Like, we need Tony, they need Tony, they need Tony. Is that to get them up to 90?
I don't think it's a number 9. I've never thought it's a number 9, you know. I genuinely think, although I do get that with the goals that they've scored all these goals.
I don't
and the
agree
goals
with
were
that,
so evenly distributed around the team, which was in itself is that good or bad? You don't know. Like, you can look at it in both ways of whatever narrative you're trying to convey.
Well, to the point
but that left-hand side, for me, that has always been more important than number 9, because it's not just about scoring goals, it's about that presence. And I just think that the presence of Martinelli and Trossard when they play on that left-hand side and what they bring, it's even like or even if you had a player who, if they could have something down that left-hand side that just, when you've got one of those two really out wide, so that someone can make that run in between that we've seen like Rice make or the fullback make, if you had a left winger who could also make that run really well in games, I think that would have really suited Arsenal. Yeah,
I think they're lacking some overall X factor on that side. And if you think of them at their best, that was when Martinelli was scoring lots of goals and going past players like all the time. And I think it's broader than that as well with Arsenal and how they've played this year. But like, that's why it's a good point that like the 11s are not, there's not a crazy difference to them. And like you say, like the striker thing, bringing a striker to Liverpool, okay, maybe they're better, maybe their overall goals are better, maybe, but Salah doesn't score the same amount. And actually right now, there's something quite nice in the energy that Diaz brings, but also when Salah gets the ball in the areas that he wants to get it into, you've got someone like Gakpo who, as much as he's a winger, he's sort of a wide forward who wants to go and score goals. And that's been to the betterment of Liverpool over the course of the season, in my opinion.
I do think if Slot has his own way in the summer, though, there'll be a bit of a reshuffle. I think he'd be looking to move on a few of those attacking Liverpool players and get some in that suits him more. Because I do think that even though it's great that he's been able to use the same core group of players every week, I think part of that is actually down to the fact that there's certain players that he just doesn't really want them to play. Like, I don't really think Darwin, Chiesa.
Yeah, I like Chiesa. I feel like he needs a few more.
But Slot doesn't seem to.
No. Neve, thank you so much. You're great. Nedum, thank you so much.
No, she's great.
You are also
I've enjoyed that. Thank you.
Great. That was lovely. And I'm excited for us to do it again. Hopefully, sometimes it'll be just the two of us, either way. And sometimes we'll get all three of us back in the room. But I'm delighted that you guys are a part of this. I wanted you both involved, and this is so cool. So thank you for making it today. Guys, if you want to follow this podcast, then click the right buttons and get involved in the comments as well. And have a great day. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.